What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be going through the Nighthaunt faction pack in full once again. It's been about 6-7 months I think that we've now had the Nighthaunt faction pack, and since we last covered it in full from front to back of the faction pack in its entirety, I haven't been posting on here. Had a few personal issues to be going through, which I spoke about a lot more on my other social medias. If you follow those, links in the description below, and also on the Lakey Wargames Discord. So I won't be going into that here because I just want to get on in to the faction pack in full. And I thought it'd be really fun because although we've had a lot of rules changes, points, we've got a lot more of the cursed souls available as regiments within the last sort of 6-7 months. And I thought it'd be fun to go back in, because that video was kind of like a first impressions thing. Obviously 4th edition had just come out, everything had been reset, we weren't too familiar with it, and it was more kind of guessing what we thought was going to be good and doing that whole kind of first look reveal almost kind of talk, instead of actually kind of having some educated experience, I suppose, behind the usage of the units and the abilities, etc. And in that time off that I've been off, I haven't been covering the changes that we usually do when the updates would come out, so we talk about the points things as they drop. So I thought it would just make more sense to go through the faction pack again in full. And I can hear you saying already, but Alex, the Nighthaunt Battle Tome is kind of like a month or two away from coming out, and this faction pack is going to be irrelevant, so why go through it in full? And you are right. Obviously we're waiting on Soulblight is the next one to come out, and then Nighthaunt, as we already know from the roadmap, is going to be coming out alongside the Idoneth Deepkin. So we probably are only like a month, I would say a month to 2 months, but yeah, I'd probably say shorter than 2 months. So yeah, probably like 4 to 6 weeks away from seeing a Battle Tome. And again, yeah, you'd be totally right in saying that, but we have seen with a lot of the battle tomes that have come out already, like we look at Stormcast, Skaven, Slaves to Darkness, and those tomes are probably like 85% exactly the same. There's been some minor changes to some of the rules, obviously some tweaking, some adjustments, but like case in point, most of the core values and a lot of the units are just copied and pasted over from the index with kind of like a little sprinkling of changes on top. So I think even going through the faction pack now in its entirety, a lot of this information is still going to be very relevant to the Battle Tome when it comes out. And obviously when the Battle Tome comes out, we can go through those changes then in a much sort of shorter graft, because I think the last faction pack talk was about 2 hours long. This one might be, in theory, should be shorter, because we know a lot more about the units, but then at the same time, because we have all that experience and knowledge now about the units, this might even go longer. I have no idea, so I apologize in advance if it's like a 3-4 hour long video. I'm not going to say never. I'm going to try and not make it that long, but I know what I'm like when I start talking like I am now. Yeah, we have that tendency to just keep rambling on, but at the same time, more information is only good when it comes to sort of tactics and speculation, right? So there's got to be something in there that's got to be for a positive. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back through the Nighthaunt faction pack with kind of the experiences that we've had over the last several months. So now, rather than being kind of a guessing game of what we think is going to be good, we can use what we know about 4th edition, the way that the rules interact, the way that certain units can gel with other units, not so much now in theory, but from what we've actually seen, and talk about those kind of things, as well as some of the changes that we've had to the faction pack since its release. So yeah, let's dive on into the faction pack, and we're going to do exactly what we did last time. We're going to have the thing up on screen here, we're going to have the faction pack up on screen, and we're going to go through it in full from front to back. This is with the most up-to-date packs here. You'll see, for anyone that's eagle-eyed, it says December here at the bottom, but this was actually the February downloads. And I won't switch over to the points. I have them printed off and in front of me for reference, so anytime that I'm talking about the points, again, that is the February 2025 set. It's now actually March, early March in time of recording, but we haven't had a March update just yet. I think when, knowing my luck, it'll probably come out tomorrow, and then there'll be like 20 Nighthaunt changes, and they'll ruin this entire thing. But yeah, just in case you're wondering why it says December at the bottom, this is actually up to date. As far as without the March update at the moment. So this is February's rule pack, as well as the points that I'll be referencing. I think the reason that we probably haven't seen a Nighthaunt one just yet is because when that Soulblight tome drops, obviously we've already seen, or you might not have seen, but if not, this is going to be some fun news for you, that we're actually going to get faction terrain for Nighthaunt. It's coming out in a dual kit with the Soulblight Gravelord's terrain. We'll talk about that in a separate video, but I think when the Soulblight tome drops, obviously the Nighthaunt PDF is going to get an update to probably include some rules for that faction terrain, because I can't imagine that they're going to drop the terrain, allow us to, that knowledge of being like, yep, this is for you, and then not have any rules for it and make us wait. So they might make us wait another 4 to 6 weeks to see what that is, but I'm sure that they'll put the terrain rules into the PDF, because they'll only have to add an extra page or so. And then, yeah, we'll probably get an update then, maybe some points tweaks or something. But again, that's all speculation. That's not anything confirmed, apart from the fact that there is going to be terrain, at least when the battle tome drops, which is exciting because we haven't had that before. So yeah, but again, we'll see when the time comes. As for now, we're going to get back on track. We're going to get into the Nighthaunt faction pack. And if you wish to continue this discussion, feel free to join the Lakey Wargames Discord, where we talk all things tabletop wargaming, from hobby to tactics for all the different games. We've got everything in there from obviously Age of Sigmar, all the different factions. We talk 40k, Lord of the Rings. There's even like Star Wars rooms in there and things. So, and we do all sorts of hobby things as well, not just gaming. So feel free to join. It's always free to join. Never put that behind a paywall or anything. Link in the description down below if you wish to carry on the discussions further, or just leave your comments in the comment section, because a lot of this is going to be, but obviously based off my personal experience, things that I've seen, things that I think, how I feel about things. So if you think slightly differently, then I always welcome those kind of things, because more sort of different opinions and perceptions of rules and interactions and tactics, the kind of things I think is great, and just makes it more exciting when you see things from a different perspective. So yeah, let's get on into it. So battle traits. Battle traits, we all know and love them by now. Ethereal obviously hasn't changed at all. We just ignore modifiers. Pretty much everything in the book, bar chain rasps, is on a 4+ save, so 4+. Being immune to rend is absolutely fantastic. This obviously, a lot of people, obviously we've always been ethereal, but a lot of people in 4th edition have decided to hate ethereal or hate on ethereal a lot more, I think, because the amount of mortal wound damage has gone down, so rend is a lot more important. Bigger units, although I say mortals have gone down, to be honest, the amount of things that are still crit mortal is actually pretty high. Every tome's got 1 or 2 units that, once reinforced and given the right buffs, they feel like they do a lot of mortal wounds. But yeah, on the whole, like a lot of things that used to do mortal wounds now are relying on rend or high damage, and obviously every time that we can make a nice ethereal save and pass that off, that only feels great. It does still obviously make us a very gambly kind of army, being on a 4+ save. It's a 50-50 whether you're going to make it or not, and it does still always feel like, you have nights where your ethereal will save you every day of the week, twice on Sundays, and then other times where your ethereal will just not save a thing. So it's one of those, you love it or you hate it, but it does help the whole Nighthaunt thing feel more to its theme, which is obviously fantastic, because we love it when the rules actually back up and make things feel like how they should. Discorporate had a change since the last time we saw this. You have to spend 1 command point to use this. It's now usable in any hero phase, whereas before this was a reaction to when one of your units got targeted by an ability. So it's obviously fantastic being able to put a 5+ ward save. Everything's got a blanket 6+ ward, apart from a few of the heroes have got better wards. So that obviously that makes you twice as sustainable once you go from that 6+ ward to a 5+ ward. when this change first came out and they changed it to the hero phase, and it is any hero phase, so you can use this in your opponent's turn because obviously it only lasts till the end of that turn. So if you use this in your hero phase, when it goes to your opponent's turn, then Discorporate wears off. You have to spend another CP to use it. When this first changed, I was just like, oh no, I was like, this is awful. I was like, why would they change this? And although there's a lot less flexibility in it now, because obviously before it was a reaction, so you would decide what's attacking you, whether it's going to be worth spending that CP to buff the ward or not. The way that the meta's sort of shaken out in 4th edition, a lot of units are now reinforced like units and being used as hammers. It's kind of like a kill before you get killed kind of meta. So you want to be using like Bladegheists or Grimghasts or Hexwraiths. You want to be using them in 10s or 20s, obviously depending on which unit that you've gone for. And Discorporate kind of, you know, picks itself in those are the types of units, especially those reinforced ones that you're going to want to have to spend the CP on to make them that much more tanky. We've got lots of spells, lots of abilities that inflict a lot of debuffs or sort of positives for making our units even more tanky on top. Discorporate is just another fantastic layer to add on. So the change to having it in any hero phase just means that you have to be thinking that kind of step or two ahead, which is something with, you know, when you're list building and your battle tactics is something that you want to be thinking of anyway, obviously depending on the mission that you've got on the day. So you're going to be kind of want to thinking a turn or two ahead, but the units that are, you know, your Discorporate targets, like I said, they kind of pick themselves. If you're going to choose between 20 Grimghast Reapers or 10 Chain Rasps, it doesn't matter if those 10 Chain Rasps are going to get hit. You put the Discorporate on the unit, and worst case scenario, your opponent's going to know ahead of time that you've picked them to be your Discorporate target and will just kind of try and avoid it. I don't see why they would, because, you know, they're just going to want to go for it anyway and try and take that unit off the table. You've made it harder for them. But in a best case scenario, you've spent a CP on a unit, it'll put the enemy off. They'll try and kill something else that isn't the Discorporate target. And in that point, you've spent a CP to make one of your scary units be, you know, unavoided, I guess, is kind of the best worst case scenario. So yeah, the change to any hero phase was an adjustment, but the sky didn't fall down and it's perfectly fine as it is. We'll talk about Wave of Terror next, because obviously the 3 Aura of Dreads all go nicely together. Wave of Terror is really nice. Obviously we spoke about that before. There's a lot of things in the Nighthaunt index that wants to always be charging, whether it's getting, you know, +1 attacks, whether it's, you know, -1 to be wounded. There's a lot of abilities that rely on having to charge, and once you're locked in combat, still being able to basically pseudo charge the enemy from being in combat, and then get those buffs on yourself from the sort of whichever unit you're using is fantastic. As a quality of life change, like, you can use this to help almost kind of redeploy yourself, because you can use the charge and actually like wrap around a unit or use it to get into a different unit that might be standing nearby if you roll high enough, and then, you know, you count as you're charging. But if that's completely irrelevant, you're already all in on the objective, you don't want your models to physically be in a different place, but you just want your bonus, being able to use this and get your charge ability off and not physically have to keep moving all the units, especially over like a 2-day event, is awesome. And we'll get into it more when we get to the sub-factions or battle formations, as they're still called. That's still something I get wrong 7 months later. I still call them sub-factions. But the battle formations, obviously Deathstalkers was a big bad. When we had Retreat and Charge army-wide, which is now, slight spoiler alert before we get onto that page, it's been nerfed to just 1 unit per turn. Having Wave of Terror to basically still be able to get everyone's charges abilities off without having complete Retreat and Charge army-wide is fantastic. So this only went up in value, in my opinion. Obviously it still does everything they exactly did. Wave of Terror itself hasn't changed, but those changes to the Retreat and Charge now make this more important to still get those charge abilities off from being in the sustained combats. And so the last part of our battle traits are the 3 Aura of Dreads. We've got Shriek, Stun and Petrify. Obviously these are absolutely fantastic debuffs to be able to put onto the enemy. They're always great to have. One thing that I did miss in the original one that I didn't point out in the video was that to use the Shriek you have to have a greater number of models in your unit than the target unit that you're attempting to Shriek. So this is obviously fantastic on bigger units, because anyone can do this as long as they outnumber. So basically anyone that's not a single entity, as long as you're greater than the number of models in the unit that you want to Shriek. So this is going to be naturally greater on things like 20 Blade Geists, Grimghasts, Chain Rasps, that kind of unit. Stun is absolutely fantastic. Obviously anytime you can get -1 to save, this adds up with your Ren. So if your unit was Ren 2 and then you get -1 to save on the enemy, that makes you like pseudo Ren 3. That's before you even add anything else in, whether you're using like Purple Sun to make the enemy another -1 to save, and with the current GBH rules, General's Handbook rules, GBH, GHB, it's different kind of thing, GBH. Yeah, so if you're using the General's Handbook rules, and obviously with the whole Honor Guard thing, and you get yourself like a nice tasty anti-infantry, you can be -1 to that. So this adds up really, really nicely. It's a great force multiplier. And surprisingly, even though it's only locked to War Machines and Cavalry, we do actually have quite a few of those sprinkled in throughout the rosters. And Hex Wraiths are absolutely fantastic. As we know, Alrich is another one because he's a War Machine keyword. He's really useful at the moment. We'll talk more about these. These will come up, obviously, as we talk about units when we're going to them. But yeah, so Stun, obviously being locked to War Machine and Cavalry, feels like something that shouldn't be as accessible as it is, but thankfully the good units in our book just lend themselves nicely to this one. And yeah, that -1 to save roll is fantastic. And last of all is Petrify, which is any of the Nighthaunt heroes that haven't used any of the other Aura of Dreads, and you can make someone strike last. And the whole strike first, strike last thing has come back a little bit in 4th edition. There's a lot of things that want to be making units strike first or make other things strike last, so using this to be able to like cancel that out, or even if the enemy isn't kind of playing into that thing at that side of the table, being able to use this and mainly protect heroes because it's coming from a hero that's charging in, making the enemy strike last. If you combo that in with another unit that's going in with them, so you petrify with the hero, and then say you've got a unit of Hex Wraiths or something, you can make them -1 to save, or you're going to hit them with the -1 to wound if you're charging a hero in with, say, like Blade Geists or Grimghasts. Comboing Petrify with a Shriek or a Stun is absolutely fantastic, and just really helps the odds survivability of any heroes, because when they go into combat, obviously everything now having a 3-inch reach is absolutely massive, and putting your heroes in the front line like that is making them very susceptible to being just punched in the face and killed, because Nighthaunt heroes, although they're ethereal, are still only, you know, little 5 wound heroes a lot of the time. And even our bigger heroes are still only like the 7 wounds, which I know once you factor in ethereal and then ward saves, actually makes them a lot more tanky than 7 wounds would feel like. But as we spoke about with ethereal, it's a bit of a gamble, and sometimes it isn't so great when you're not rolling too hot. So Petrify is something that I didn't put a lot of stock in. Admittedly, you know, you see the -1 to save and the -1 to hit, and you get the shiny eyes from those because they're awesome, but that strike last is actually super important. And we'll talk about more of these with the units as they come up. So moving on to the battle formations, and on the whole I'm still pretty disappointed with the battle formations. We've got nice variety between all of them. So Vanishing Phantasms is kind of like a movement one, Deathstalkers is a movement one, and then we've got Hunters of the Accursed, which is a damaging one, and then we have the Procession of Death, which is like a more tanky one. And that sounds great, you know, 2 movement ones in an army that wants to do lots of movement shenanigans, an extra damaging one in case you want to pile more pressure on, which Nighthaunt on the whole is. Obviously we spoke about that with Wave of Terror. We've got a lot of things that want to be doing a lot of charging, getting in sort of your opponent's face and just taking the fight to the enemy. So any time that you can put more damage out is usually going to be a good time. And obviously if you've watched any of my old like 3rd edition videos, we were a massive fan of the Emerald Host back in the day, the 3rd edition one where it would do damage to sort of enemy units at the end of the turns. This is kind of the successor of it with a different stipulation. But yeah, Overall, Deathstalkers is the one that we see all the time, for good reasons. You know, I think one of the things that really annoyed me a lot is everyone moans that, you know, we had army-wide retreat and charge, which is strong. It's very, very strong. But it's something that we had book-wide, army-wide, all of 3rd edition, and we were still bottom of the win rates. But I think when 4th editions come out, the way that battle tactics are, and the fact that everyone has to draw from the same battle tactics now, you know, obviously we had a load of like battle tome tactics and things that were being able to draw from other places. So there was a big old list that different armies could draw from different places and pick their favourite ones. But now there's a lot of smaller lists, and everyone's doing the same battle tactics, and a lot of them, so like take their land, take the flank, seize the centre, those kind of movement ones. Our army is obviously fly. We have a lot of fly keywords, basically army-wide. We're higher movement, with our lowest movement being 8, I think, across the board. Being able to retreat and charge and just claim that board space and do those things is obviously very oppressive. And it just happened that Nighthaunt played well into that kind of space, and Deathstalkers just really emulated that. One of the things that I think is that made it really overpowered was that it was run and charge. If this was still army-wide and just retreat and charge, it would be really strong still, but I think it was the fact that it was army-wide, run, and retreat or charge that just made it absolutely bonkers crazy. But obviously this is one of the ones, it suffered the big nerf, so quote-unquote, and it's now just pick a Nighthaunt unit, a friendly Nighthaunt unit. So you can only use this on 1 unit a turn, and even with the fact that this got nerfed from army-wide to a single unit, still makes it better than the other 3, hands down. The other 3 are cool, but this is just, yeah, you just want you just want this ability all the time, because it is just so much hands down more useful. It's just never not situationally good. You're always going to want to sort of retreat and charge out of things. Like I said already, Hex Wraiths, we'll get to those when we get to those, but Hex Wraiths are fantastic. They do impact hits when they're charging. Again, you can use Wave of Terror, but more importantly, just being able to retreat out of things and change that board state is the big thing. And yeah, and using the run and charge, if you use the command ability to auto run 6, obviously with something like Hex Wraiths that are already like crazy movement, like movement 12, then you add the 6 to them, now they're movement 18, then they can run and charge. Then there's other ways when we get into the, like with the endless spells and Nighthaunt the Terminexus, you can add pluses to your run and charge rolls. So this can make, especially our cavalry units, but even just our foot troops, again being movement 8, adding 6 to your run, and then being able to charge off the back of it. And then if someone tries to tie you up in combat and you don't want to be there, just being able to leave that situation is fantastic. So Deathstalkers is still the big winner. It got nerfed, rightly so, because it's that big run and charge, but you know, everyone was hating on us for this, like, ethereal and healing and retreat and charge, this army is broken. It's like, well, that was us also in 3rd edition, but we sucked. We just play nicely into the rules, and everyone has to play by the same rules now, so apart from us, who obviously were retreating and charging out. So I get it, because obviously it went with the core rules. So yeah, Deathstalkers is fine. Again, the thing is, that makes it feel really thematic. You know, ghosts shouldn't be able to be something that can lock down. That kind of just ethereal phasing in and out of things and just being like, nope, I'm a ghost, I'm gone, and just fly off somewhere else is great. So I think the fact that it's now only 1 unit is fine. No complaints. Like I said, it's just that thing. I can see why it was like super oppressive and super good. But the reason it's disappointing, I think, from a Nighthaunt perspective, is less that Deathstalkers is so good and more that the other 3 just don't compete. We'll start with Cavalcade of Death, the Procession of Death. This was one that I was really excited for on all of my first lists. As much as I saw that Deathstalkers was the one, this was the one that I had hope for and I really wanted to be good. And it's when friendly infantry Nighthaunt units have a 5+ ward while they're wholly within 6 inches of the Black Coach. And I was like, yes, we're going to make the Black Coach great again. This is, you know, going to be awesome. So for one, once you start reinforcing your unit, so whether you want Reapers, Harridans or Revenants, trying to fit 20 of them around a black coach wholly within 6 inches is a lot harder than it feels. Obviously the black coach has a massive base size, so it's great for having 2 like smaller units either side of it. It's great for blanketing like foot infantry heroes, and they easily fit within 6 inches of it. But the problem is, once things start moving and it gets chaotic, and you try and make those charges, you want to make sure you're all on the objectives and things, actually staying within 6 inches of the black coach really tethers you down. Because it's like, to sit within that 6 inches then really limits like all the other places that you want to be. And as we already saw, we've got Discorporate in the back pocket, so we can get a 5+ ward save at the start of the hero phase anyway for our big important unit, and you don't have to bring the black coach. And the black coach is, we'll go into that more depth when we get to it, but in my opinion was actually quite disappointing as a war scroll this time around. So yeah, the Cavalcade of Death, I don't feel it's worth it to shoehorn yourself within that little 6-inch bubble next to a unit that isn't, in my opinion, that great for a buff that we can get elsewhere. Next one we'll talk about is Vanishing Phantasms. I know I'm doing this in a weird order. It's just kind of like I'm doing them more sort of like backwards in the way of the ones that I least liked. Although, like I said, Cavalcade was one I was actually most excited for. But anyway, so Vanishing Phantasms is once per turn in your movement phase, and this is the one that lets you pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit that is not in combat, and you can just basically teleport them anywhere onto the table as long as they remain outside of 9 from enemy units. It has some nice stipulations. It plays nicely with like a unit of Craven Throne Guard who just want to be sort of popping their shots off and just harassing units. It's great for sort of setting yourself up, not for that turn, but for like the turn after. There are ways to get more charging in your army list. You can get like +1 to charge with the Terminexus again. So it's, you can kind of use it for that. The thing I find with Ethereal Translocation though is it's great for that kind of turn 1, turn 2, put something in the backfield, add that bit of pressure on there. But the whole being outside of 9, 9-inch charges are, when you spend a command point with a reroll, not impossible to get, but at the same time, it's not something that you're really wanting to be banking on. There's nothing else that really gives lots of charges. And we have something else in the army, Alrich, cough cough, who just basically does this, the exact same stipulation, not being in combat, but better. And yeah, so, only affecting a single unit. If it was a single friendly Nighthaunt unit that was, just in general, like if there was someone that was in combat, say you've got a unit with like Bladegeist Revenants, they're down to their last 2 models, they're stuck in a fight against like 20 clan rats, obviously they're not going to want to be in combat there anymore. Playing this and just being able to like teleport those 2 guys out maybe to the backboard, and then you can start healing that unit up, would feel great. But yeah, obviously you don't want to be retreating those last 2 guys out, because then they still take the mortal wounds, which is something that Deathstalkers does that I didn't even talk about before. The taking no mortal damage, because you can still retreat. Obviously you won't be able to charge, but in that kind of situation you're going to take your mortal wounds from retreating, possibly kill yourself if there's only a couple of things left, which you don't want to be doing. So yeah, I think if this was just, if you could teleport while in combat, this would be a lot more situationally better. But once you're all locked in, which is something that we want to be doing, there's not many units that want to be staying outside of combat to then teleport outside in 9 without ways to get that extra charging. So yeah, Translocation kind of feels a bit of a letdown in that thing. There are builds and plays around it, but again, it just feels like for a mobility thing, Deathstalkers is just better, because once you're in combat, like I said, with that high movement value, our general troops being a movement of 8, just retreating up over the top of a unit 8 inches, getting to somewhere else is perfectly fine. And the last one is Hunters of the Accursed, and this is one after I realized that the Procession of Death and the Cavalcade of Death rule wasn't too great, this was like the next one I was just like, okay, so I liked this one, but now I actually don't like it. This one I've just written off on paper. Deathstalkers is obviously powerful, and I was like, Hunters of the Accursed. I was like, can we get this to work? And it's perfectly great for what it does. Again, Deathstalkers is just that retreat in charge and run in charge is just so good for setting things up and just controlling the board, tying up enemy units that then can't retreat away from you. It's just, and because you can pick a different unit every turn, it just lends itself into so many different situations to help win you games so much more. That yeah, Deathstalkers, I just keep saying it, like, it's just the best one for many obvious reasons. But Hunters of the Accursed is one that, like, on theme, I would say this is like my second pick. I do really like it. So it's the one where you get to pick 3 enemy heroes, each within 12 inches of a friendly Nighthaunt hero to be the target. You roll a d3, and on a 2+, you inflict a amount of mortal damage equal to the roll on the target. So you're basically going to be doing 2 or 3 mortal wounds on enemy heroes if they're within 12 inches of a Nighthaunt hero, and you can't tag team the same enemy hero with 2 of your Nighthaunt heroes, because that would have been cool. You know, they step up a little bit, you move up within 12 with 3 heroes, and then you just sort of go like bam, just make them take 9 mortal wounds. I can see why that would have been impressive. But for the same reason that this is really cool is the same reason that I actually don't like it very much. I feel that because this is, you know, obviously it's a short range thing within 12 inches. The not double tapping with heroes I'm perfectly fine with, but the fact that it's only tied to enemy heroes, you know, I kind of get that that's the theme, that obviously it's the Nighthaunt things, you know, they've marked the enemy heroes with a curse, and that there's, you know, that kind of thing of going after their champions. But I feel this would unlock so much more. And the fact that it's end of any turn, which I get, because then you're sort of double tapping this at the end of your turn, end of the enemy turn. Ooh, sorry. Right clicking there. So I get that obviously double tapping this would be very, very strong. But what I feel like is this one could be so much better if it was just the simple change of make it so this is just any enemy units within 12. So it's not tied to enemy heroes. Make this so it's just end of your turn, not any turn. So it's only going off 5 times a game and not 10. And then obviously keep the bit where 2 Nighthaunt heroes can't target the same enemy unit. And then just remove the 2+. Just let it be a D3. So you can target 3 enemy units within 12 inches of 3 different Nighthaunt heroes. And they just take D3 mortal wounds at the end of your turn. Because obviously, if you were doing D3 mortal wounds 10 times a game, that's up to, you know, with 3 different heroes, that's a lot of mortal wounds. But yeah, I feel like this would open up the door for more like support heroes that don't see a lot of play, or want to not be in the front lines. So things like your Spirit Torments, your Scriptor Mortises, those kind of heroes would absolutely love something like this, because then their role is to sit back and support your units, and they offer out their buffs in their own certain ways, but then they don't offer anything else out. There's no incentive to get them sort of up close to the enemy. You don't want them in combat, but this would be great to have them sit in that back line and still be able to provide some chip damage. And I feel like that with those changes, it would make this strong enough to actually kind of like be like, oh, actually that does do a lot of damage in that respect. And obviously we still got the stipulation, like you could still pick enemy heroes if you wanted to, because they're still an enemy unit. You still can't double tap it, and it's only going off half as much to help, you know, kind of emulate that thing of not having, you know, too much damage going through, especially if you remove the 2+. I mean, you could even keep that and make the other changes that I spoke about. But I just feel like this would help a lot of our support heroes do a bit more chip damage, and would just help give an option, because Deathstalkers would then be crazy mobility, but then this one just helps you if you just want to make a list that's a lot more punchy, which is what I feel like this should be. But it's just a lot of, you know, ifs and or buts, because it's only enemy heroes, only if you get within 12. If you get within 12 of a big enemy combat hero, like, then, you know, you're just going to get charged in the face and then punched to death at the end of that, like, next turn. So it's cool. It's cool. It's really great for shutting down like small support heroes, like say like a Necromancer or something like that, like a little 5 wound hero, preferably one that doesn't have a ward save. And this can be, this feels really, really good against those targets, especially if you've got someone like Lady O who's like going around, they don't want to, kind of be messing with that kind of thing. It can be nice, but Deathstalkers is just for what it is. It's just the pick. So the battle formations on the whole feel a little bit flat, not because I can see what they've gone for with the other ones, but yeah, Deathstalkers is just so good. But I feel like the tweaks to the other ones would make for some more interesting plays. Maybe, like I said, the Vanishing Phantasms, I feel like it would be better if you could just teleport even if you're in combat. That would just open that up a lot more. Hunters of the Accursed, maybe if it was just any units went off half as much, that would be nice for that kind of chip damage effect. And Procession of Death, I think I'd make it better. Just make the bubble bigger. Make the Black Coach War Scroll good, for one. Make the Black Coach worth taking. We'll talk more about the Black Coach when we get to the Black Coach. And then also just make the bubble bigger. Maybe it doesn't even have to double to like 12, but just make it like 8 or 10. Because obviously in a massive circle around the Black Coach. Because it's to incentivize you taking like 2 Black Coaches. But yeah, with a 6-inch bubble for a 5-up ward. And maybe just get rid of the infantry keyword, because there's so many things in the list that would that want to keep up with the Black Coach, that would really benefit from this. I'd love to be able to like run a unit of Hexwraiths and Reikenor next to a Black Coach and then have them empowered by the Black Coach and then sort of all charge in like a nice spearhead together. That would be absolutely awesome. But trying to fit them all within a 6-inch bubble, which doesn't matter for them anyway because they're not infantry, so they don't benefit, so it doesn't matter. But admittedly, this does go nicely with like a unit of like Mirmorn Banshees, something like that, because it's a lot of smaller footprint. But then again, they're a smaller, slightly more fragile unit, and then the Black Coach again isn't great. So then it starts becoming a lot of points into things that you're like, you just better off taking 20 Revenants in Deathstalkers and just shoving them down the enemy's front door. So yeah, but we'll stop talking about battle formations because I feel like I've spent a long time talking about all of those different things, but those are just my thoughts about them. And obviously Deathstalkers is still king. Next up, we're going to talk about the heroic traits, and these kind of suffer from the same thing. The heroic traits, Ruler of the Spectral Hosts, costs you a command point to use. It's only once per battle, but even though the other two are passive and on all the time, Ruler of the Spectral Hosts is basically like the Deathstalkers of the heroic traits. It's the one that lets you pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit that had 3 or more models in it that had been destroyed, and you can set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from them, wholly within 12 inches of the unit that has this trait, and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Now this is absolutely fantastic if you get like a unit of 10 Hexwraiths destroyed, a unit of like 20 Bladegeist Revenants, 20 Grimghast Reapers. Those are kind of like the ideal targets. Like it feels so nice when 10 Hexwraiths get absolutely smushed and you're like, oh man, I've lost my Hexwraith. Like, damn, because 10 Hexwraiths is a lot of things to chew through. And then, if you make that mistake and the enemy capitalizes on it and they absolutely crush one of your bigger reinforced units like that, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, there's a plan B. I can bring half of them back for the command point, try and sort of bring that situation back into line. So this is just absolutely fantastic on those kind of things. I found, though, a lot of the times it's really nice to have it on sort of more support kind of units, like, because with Discorporate, with like some of the spells that we'll get to when we get to them, like Shade Mist, those kind of things, being able to make things -1 to wound, giving them a 5+ ward. When you charge on your turn, you might be using your Shriek or something to make them -1 to hit as well. Like, there's a lot of debuffs that we can put onto things to make our stuff really hard to kill. And on top of units like Hexwraiths, like Bladegeist Revenants, actually getting 10 of the Hexwraiths or 20 Bladegeist Revenants killed with all of the debuffs and all of our buffs stacked on them is actually quite a thing to lose them so early on in the game. That Spectral Hosts, like I said, they are the dream targets, returning half of those units, because being able to bring back half of them feels so much better. But a lot of the times I find myself using Spectral Hosts to actually kind of sneak in for that battle tactic or something. You might lose like a side unit, say you've got like 10 Chain Rasps or something that you've just taken as a screen, just something to sit on the side, sit on a back objective. They get wiped out because they're 10 Chain Rasps and they're crap, but no one cares. and then all of a sudden you just bring 5 chain rasps back. You know, you bring them off to the side, and then the next turn they move up, they do something like take their land. You know, they're just in the enemy deployment zone, they take that back objective, and it's 5 chain rasps. Like, your opponent doesn't want to have to dedicate an entire unit to have to go and deal with 5 chain rasps, but they've already come back to life, they've scored you a battle tactic, they've taken an objective, whatever you needed them to do for that turn prior, they've already scored you those points. And then obviously, like I said, your opponent has to go out of the way to deal with them, or they're just going to sit in the back, again, just maybe capping those objectives in the later to mid game where, you know, things have started to die, peel off, tie up your more important units. Then Rule of the Spectral Host is amazing for that kind of thing. And again, whether if you use Deathstalkers, then your big scary units, your big reinforced units, the ones that you'd love to replace half of but hopefully haven't got killed, are going to be being able to retreat and charge and just tie up the enemy in other ways. So your Spectral Host unit, whichever one you've returned, is actually kind of come out more on top that way. So that's a really nice use that I found for Spectral Hosts, is more, you know, not on those big scary units, but it's actually the smaller units that you can then bring back sneakily off to the side of the table that your opponent's not really going to sort of put eyes on and focus on, are the ones that are actually really worthy of bringing this trait for. Now the other two, so Cloaked in Shadow and Terrifying Entity. Terrifying Entity had a few changes, so that's this one here, where now this is just a unit can use any of the Aura of Dread abilities even if it doesn't have the required keywords. This one is really nice in practice, or in theory I suppose. Tried to work out a few things for using this. So like for example, you've got your Guardian of Souls. He's obviously an infantry guy on foot, but if he's a Terrifying Entity and you charge on in, then he can use something like Stun, which is normally for cavalry or war machines. So you can put a -1 to save, say he's in a unit of Blade Guys Revenants who also aren't a war machine or a cavalry, but then you can still make the use of that Aura of Dread. And that seems really, really nice on paper. But again, if you're using Deathstalkers, you can just retreat your cavalry out from wherever you need them with that insane movement. And you just generally don't need this, or, you know, because you're going to have units that are able to use the different Aura of Dreads anyway. You're going to be putting this on a hero who's just going to be making things strike last, so like you can just pile in the hurt on the enemy anyway. And yeah, this one's good, but Spectral Host is just better. So yeah. And Cloaked in Shadow is the one where unmodified hit rolls of an attack that target this unit is a 1 to a 3, then it automatically fails. Is nice for keeping things survivable, but yeah, like there's a lot of like heroes and things. I just find it's just not worth that kind of thing, because if your opponent's putting your attention into said heroes, they're not killing your units that are actually going to be winning you the games. Nighthaunt has, you know, historically been one of those factions. We rely a lot on our heroes to do a lot of buffs and things for us, but I found a lot in 4th edition that actually our units are more capable than they've probably ever been, to be honest. Obviously we benefit really nicely from spells and buffs and things, but you know, at the end of the day, buffs and that, they really help you out in that early game, sort of turns 1 to 3, and then after that, like the units are they're just winning you games on their own. So yeah, taking the whole trait to kind of do that thing is yeah, just not really worth it, because there's other ways to make your heroes more tanky. And again, with your Aura of Dreads, you can just use Petrify, make the enemy strike last, and just kill the enemy before they get a chance to kill your hero. So Cloaked in Shadow is kind of irrelevant in that way. Again, like I said earlier, the 4th edition meta is a lot more take your big hammer units and just kill before you get killed kind of thing. So, you know, Cloaked in Shadow puts you on the defensive when you just want to use your Aura of Dread, which all of your heroes can do anyway. Make the enemy strike last, charge in a different unit that can, you know, like with Hex Race or something in the side, so you also get stun, and then you pile in your 20 Grimghast Reapers on that unit that's striking last, and you just kill them all before they get to your hero. So yeah, you can make Cloaked in Shadow irrelevant in that regard. Next up, the Artifacts of Power. And again, it's the same kind of thing. Light Shard of the Harvest Moon is the one that you'll see a lot. And even though that this is also a once per battle thing, you would think usually when you look at a lot of tomes, the once per battle ones are like rubbish. And you want to be trying to use something that's passive. But with Nighthaunt, the 2 once per battle ones are actually fantastic. again, this plays into that whole, you just want to put pressure onto things, kill before you get killed, and adding +1 to your attacks characteristics of Nighthaunt units wholly within 12 inches for that turn is amazing. You get someone like a Khan Wraith, who gives +1 attack to Grimghast Reapers while he's in combat, in the combat range of them and in combat with an enemy. He's also got the Light Shard, so he pops that, so he's now giving +2 attack to Grimghast Reapers, who have already got 2 attacks base, so now they're 4 attacks each in a reinforced unit of 20. And then you get +1 attack for a champion, so you're throwing 81 attacks with your Grimghast Reapers. Oof. Like, that kind of situation is crazy. And same with Bladegeist Revenants. They love this one as well, because 2 attacks base, they get +1 if they charge in. You charge in with something that's going to be using the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon. Again, Petrify being absolutely huge, because you're charging in with you want to charge in with a hero plus the unit that you want to be doing the killing with. The hero is going to Petrify, make the enemy strike last. You're then going to give all your guys +1 attack. So again, with Bladegeist Revenants, 2 attacks base. They've got a thing on their War Scroll, +1 attack if they charge in. So now they're on 3. Then you pop Light Shard. Now they've got 4 attacks each, and you just go ham. So yeah, feels absolutely great. Light Shard is awesome, because you just sort of see that unit, you go, right, I want to kill that unit, point, click, delete, pop the Light Shard, do what you got to do, get on in, petrify them, and just slay. Which, again, these other two are quite cool. The Familiar is one where if the opponent tries to punch your hero, then you roll dice, and you roll a d3, and on a 2+, you inflict some mortal wounds back to them. This is cool in theory, but again, a bit like Cloaked in Shadow, that means you're going to want to be punched. And if you really want to set it up so you're charging, you get the Petrify, you make them strike last, and you just kill them before they kill you, so you don't need the Familiar. And Light Shard only makes you more deadly on that charge, the turn that you go in really heavy. So Familiar is cool. That combos really nicely with the Hunters for the Accursed, because then your hero, you're in combat, so you're already going to be within 12. End of the turn, you get a chance to do a D3. You're going to do D3 if they declare a fight and they're in your combat range. So that's kind of nice for trying to pseudo snipe heroes. But again, don't bank on it. You just want to be setting it up more aggressive. Keep your heroes kind of safe out of that combat. Then on your turn, charge in, petrify, kill. So yeah, Familiar, cool, but eh. And Soulfire Ring is, so one of the big complaints that I have with the Nighthaunt book, or the index in general, is the amount of healing that we don't have access to for our heroes. It's always been a big gripe of mine, and it's more reinforced in this rule set than ever. We've got quite a fair few ways to heal units, but hero healing is really difficult, and the Soulfire Ring does let you do that. So if any models were slain, you get to heal a d6. So basically it makes your units, your hero unit, sorry, have to be one shot. Again, a lot of the things in our thing have 5 to 7 wounds, so healing d6 on a hero that's only 5 to 7 wounds is big. This is really nice on like a Lord Executioner, something like that. Night Shroud's not so much because he's already healing. Something like a Khan Wraith or Lord Executioner that wants to be in, wants to be fighting, can really make use of the Soulfire Ring if you want to use it. But again, from a competitive element, you just want to make sure you're out of the danger zone, and then when you go into the danger zone, it's on your terms. You're charging, you petrify, you smash. So Soulfire Ring, a bit like the Familiar, a bit like Cloaked in Shadow, you're kind of inviting that pressure on, because this means you're gonna want to be taking damage, then swing second, then kill something, then heal up. Where again, you just want to try and make it so your heroes are safe until they can dominate the enemy. Our spell lore. So this is one of the things that all of them are fantastic. I apologise to have been a bit negative through the battle formations and the traits and the artifacts. But yeah, unfortunately it's just skewed. There's a lot of things across all of the indexes. This isn't just a Nighthaunt problem. I think it's just a rules problem in general. A lot of the indexes are skewed in that way. Whether it's because, we've only got like 3 of each trait, 3 of each command, rather than having like the full 6. I mean, I would say yes, because obviously more choice is always nice, but at the same time, if you're going to only write 3 instead of 6 like artifacts or traits, then just make them all good, make them all or all equally as bad. So there's less. This one's the good one, and these ones are rubbish. So yeah, it's a thing across all the indexes. A lot of things have like that one standout thing that's above the rest. But yeah, but the spell lore, the lore of the underworlds, that's where we are at, and all three of these are fantastic. I love the spell lore. Casting values, 6 on Shade Mist, 7 on Spirit Drain, and 6 on Spectral Lore is really, really nice. Spirit Drain being the highest one, but also being the most situational one, is great, because that means the 2 that you want to be casting pretty much all the time are the easier ones to cast. Shade Mist is our unlimited spell. It seems that like every faction has at least one unlimited spell, and ours is absolute baller. You pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit that has 3 or more models wholly within 12 inches of the Nighthaunt wizard that casts it, and you are now -1 to wound for attacks that target them until the start of your next turn. And that's just awesome, because a lot of our debuffs are like till the end of that turn. So if you go first in a round, and then obviously your turn ends and it goes over to the opponent's turn, then you lose your thing. But now that this goes back around, if it goes to your opponent's turn and then they double you, they go again, then you're still going to be benefiting from Shade Mist. So this is like a fantastic thing, and being able to put it down multiple times. So you've got like 20 Blade Geist Revenants and 10 Hex Wraiths, as long as you've got 2 different wizards that can put out the spell, because the unlimited spells, although you can cast them multiple times, has to be from different sources. So you need at least 2 wizards to benefit from double Shade Mist, but putting them down on 2 of your big reinforced units is awesome, and again just helps keep that pressure on the enemy by making your stuff so much harder to kill. And casting value of 6 is fantastic. Spirit Drain is the hardest one to cast on the 7. It's basically an anti-horde spell. When you get that off, it's roll a dice for every model in the enemy unit, and they take a mortal wound on roll of a 5+. So you want to be casting this on something that's got like 20-30 models in it. You'll do a sprinkle of mortal wounds. Great for just being able to dent units, and just that kind of thing. The best thing about this one is it has a fantastic range. It's just pick an enemy unit within 18 inches. They don't even have to be wholly within 18 inches. So if you just clip one enemy model that's, you know, within that big 30-man unit, then you're going to be able to Spirit Drain the entire thing. And again, like I said, Nighthaunt really thrives on just putting loads of pressure onto the enemy, and being able to do mortal wounds in that kind of capacity is only going to help benefit from that. And Spectral Lore is our last spell, and this is my favourite one, probably everybody's favourite one, although not if you're fighting against Nighthaunt. And that's the one, again, you pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit wholly within 12 inches of the wizard, and then you get to return a number of slain models in the target unit with a combined health characteristic up to D6. Now, this spell is like one of the ones, like I said, your opponent will hate this, but again, it's a bit swingy because it's on the D6. So when you roll the 5 or a 6, it feels amazing. Like returning 5 or 6 Revenants, Grimghasts, Harridans, like those kind of things is awesome. Even if you roll that 6 and you've put it on like Hex Wraiths, you know, returning 2 whole Hex Wraiths, a couple of Spirit Hosts, like that feels amazing. Not so much on the turns that you only roll a 1 or a 2. Anything's better than nothing though. So even just returning 1 or 2 models, but obviously it feels a lot nicer when you return more. But the thing I love most about Spectral Lore, obviously within 4th edition, is now that we have the command where you can cast your spells at the end of the enemy hero phase, like being able to double tap Spectral Lore, the fact that it's on a 6 on your turn, then you're -1 when you cast that, is just amazing. Like being able to basically do a 2d6 heal across 2 turns is awesome. And definitely way worth the magical intervention if you have nothing else that's sort of taking priority, depending on the manifestations and things that you've taken. You might want to do it like with Shade Mist. If you fail to cast that in your turn, you might want to put Shade Mist down on a unit instead. But Spectral Lore is absolutely fantastic. And if you get anywhere near like a place of power, or like Reikenor, for example, Reikenor being able to boost up his casting value, these 6s then becoming 5s. And then in the enemy turn, when you magical intervention, if you still have that way to get your +1 to cast, again looking at you, Mr. Reikenor, basically nullifying the -1 from the magical intervention, still casting this on a 6 is very much in your favour. So absolutely love the spell lore that we have access to. Next up is the Manifestation Lore. So these are the Nighthaunt Endless spells. They all cast on a 6, which, as we spoke about with like Spectral Lore and Shade Mist, is fantastic values to be able to cast on. If you can draw yourself like a +1 to cast, these becoming 5s is fantastic. And even when you suffer the -1 on like a magical intervention, you need to get one of these out. Putting them to a 7 isn't the worst thing in the world. That's your average on 2 dice. So you're still going to get these out more often than you don't. The nice things with the stipulations here, what we'll do is last time we went through this, and then I didn't realise till we went through the book the first time, is that the actual war scrolls for the endless spells are at the back of the index. So what we'll do is we'll go through this, and then we'll jump up to the war scrolls, talk about all the endless spells in one go, and then before we go on to the rest of the units. But yeah, all casting value of 6. My feelings on the Nighthaunt Endless spells in general are like really mixed. It feels, they've got, between them, they all do really nice different things. Like it feels, that we've got something for like each situation. The Terminexus and the Vault of Souls are just wholly within 12 inches of the caster. So if you're stuck in the middle of combat, you can get these spells out when you need them, which is great. The Shyish Reaper is like a combat one, so that's one where it's like it has to be more than 9 inches away. This is a good target to put on the magical intervention, get this out on your opponent's turn, then when it flips over to your turn you can now move it. So being outside of 9, then you can move up and then you can charge is a good thing for the Reaper. But the Terminix and that, you can just kind of use it as like I need this now and then just cast that up in the combats there. But yeah, it just feels like with all of our endless spells, they all do things that are in the other manifestation laws, but worse. So we'll cover them more when we get into them, but it just feels like, because all the endless spells, you can take any manifestation law. You don't have to take the one that's in your index. You can take any of them. They're all free. So you're not paying any points for any of the manifestations. It's just like, why would you have these when you can take better versions of them elsewhere? And the other endless spells that go in that manifestation law are also better. I can imagine that changing. It feels, I think Games Workshop know that the way that endless spells are. And we've seen a few nerfs to some of the manifestations that have only gone up in casting values, which is a problem in its own way, because then that makes it easier for big wizards to cast them who are already abusing them, and then smaller wizards and people that don't have access to lots of casting values now still struggle to put them out. So yeah, let's get on into them and then we can talk about what I'm driveling on about. So the first one up we have is the Mortalis Terminexus. This was a blessed spell in 3rd edition. We absolutely loved this one, combining this with the Emerald Host. It used to do damage, now it doesn't. That never did that in 4th edition, so I know I shouldn't be comparing the two, but I still, very fond memories of the Terminexus. And it's sad to see what it's become in 4th edition. This does actually do one thing that I just said in my previous statement, that I find that our book sucks at. And this is the only thing I think actually in the entire index that heals or can heal heroes. So yeah, casting value of 6. It just has to be wholly within 12 of the wizard that cast it. So we can pop this out anywhere. And then what happens is, in your hero phase, you pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit within 3 inches, so basically in the combat range of the manifestation. Roll a dice, and on a 2+, you can pick one of the following effects. Now this is what I spoke about with Deathstalkers. You can either add 1 to your run and charge rolls for the rest of the turn, which is fantastic because Deathstalkers lets you run and charge, or retreat and charge. So putting down the Terminexus, buffing up the unit on a 2+, you now have +1 to run and charge rolls. Like I said, something like Hex Wraiths, where you're going to be using that obscene movement. If you use the command to auto run 6 and you've been buffed by the Terminexus, you're now actually going to run 7, and then when you charge again, you're going to be getting +1 on top of that movement, so you can absolutely fly across the board. And then the other thing is just heal 3 to the target. There's no, that isn't like infantry thing. So you can use this to heal heroes, you can heal a Black Coach, anything with the Nighthaunt keyword, and you can heal it, which is fantastic. The things I hate about the Terminexus though is, the first one is that rolling a dice you know, because you can still roll the 1. Sure, a 2+ is very great odds, but it feels bad, especially in those moments that, you know, you really need that heal on a hero. Losing out on the charge roll and the +1 to run is not such a big deal. You know, it's nice to have, but like if you roll the 1 and that was your plan, it's kind of like, you know, it's great when it's there, but it's not going to be the end of the world. But like when you desperately need that heal and then you roll a 1, it feels so bad. And the other thing that I really hate about the Terminexes is it has no move value. So it just feels really weird in a unit, in an army with lots of units that are obviously high movement. There's formations like Deathstalkers that are encouraging us to retreat out of combat, charge elsewhere. All of our war scrolls have those things where they get pluses when they charge. So it's an army that obviously wants to be going around the board, wants to be moving a lot, wants to do lots of high pressure, lots of things like that. And the Terminexus is like a support spell that just can't go anywhere. It can't do anything, it can't keep up. And it just feels odd, you know, to not be able to bring that support spell and float around with the units and be able to do what it needs to do. But I guess that's why it doesn't have the thing where it has to be, you know, start off outside a 9. But you look at things, so one of the comparisons to this, again, mainly looking at that heal. One thing I will give it is a flat heal of 3. This could have easily been, looking across like the way that the rules team have written a lot of things, this could have easily been a D3 heal, but it's not. It's a flat 3 heal, which is really, really nice, because then, you know, you know what you're going to be getting that heal, guaranteed, a 3, as long as you don't roll a 1. And yeah, obviously with its casting value, there's no stipulation. It's just wholly within 12 inches of the caster. So if you're the guy that you want to be healing, or the target you want to heal, is in combat, then you can put the Terminexus down, you know, regardless of whether there's enemies there or not, as long as the Terminexus can obviously get within 3 inches of the target that you want to be healing. But the Emerald Life Swarm is just, it does the same kind of thing, but the Emerald Life Swarm, it moves. And the rest of the Emerald Life Swarm lore, I think, is it's the Burning Head and, oh gosh, I can't think, it's the Primal Elegies, I think it is. And it's Jaws, Ravanax Jaws, I think it is the other spell. So yeah, so Emerald Life Swarm does the same thing, healing of 3, but the Emerald Life Swarm doesn't have to roll, and the Emerald Life Swarm also moves. So it's like Life Swarm, And we'll get onto the other spells in a minute, but basically Burning Head and Ravanax Jaws do more damage than the Shyish Reaper. So yeah, if you want the damage ones and a healing support one, it's like you'd be better off with the other ones and not the Nighthaunt ones. But the Nighthaunt ones look cool, and obviously they're themed because it's the Nighthaunt and the spells. So yeah. Next up is the Vault of Souls. Same thing, this one doesn't move, and you know, this one I don't feel too bad about. It would be great if this one moved, but I get, obviously the thing that it does is basically every time is a model, friendly or enemy, is slain within 12 inches of this manifestation, you give it a soul point to a maximum of 6, and then when this manifestation has 6 soul points, you pick any number of enemy units within 6 inches to be the targets, roll a dice for each unit, and on a 3+ you inflict a number of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll, then reset the soul points to 0. So basically you're going to be doing between 3 and 6 mortal wounds on every enemy within 6 inches of this manifestation when it reaches 6 soul points at the end of any turn that it does so. Which is really easy to charge up because it's friendly or enemy models slain within 12. The Vault of Souls is fantastic if you put it, you know, next to something like Chain Rasps. It's kind of like it's a great, kind of like a booby trap almost. You cast it, you put it next to some Chain Rasps, your opponent comes in, they wipe the Chain Rasps, and then the Vault of Souls will detonate because Chain Rasps was so easy to kill, and then hopefully you'll do 6 mortal wounds back to the enemies as they get there. The one problem is with this spell, though, is obviously being able to, in 4th edition, fight and shoot other endless spells, and only having the short range of like 6, it's really hard to put the Vault of Souls out and not have it so it gets tagged or piled into by the enemy, and it's only 6 health with a 4-up save and a 6+ ward, so it's not the hardest thing in the world to kill. Weirdly, it's the hardest one to banish on like an 8+. It's really hard to dispel, but just really easy to punch in the face. So a lot of the times you try and put the Vault of Souls out next to an enemy unit, and the enemy unit can often, more than not, if they're on the offensive, and like I said with my example, next to some chain rasps, something that they're just going to steamroll, they will also dedicate some bodies into attacking your Vault of Souls, kill your unit and kill the Vault of Souls, or very highly damage your unit and deal with the Vault of Souls. So it doesn't kind of get to do what it wants to do in theory, but it's nice, you know, it's there. If you're taking, you know, this spell lore, it's not completely useless. But yeah, actually getting it to do what it wants to do is a lot harder than it seems. And again, because it can't move, so you have to try and set this up. Like, it's usually best near a really hotly contested objective where there's going to be a lot of fighting, and then trying to play that game of keeping it outside of 3 so it can absorb the soul points and still be within 6 inches of the enemy. Hopefully they can't pile into it that turn and get it to do the detonation is nice. But with a lot of our hammer units, like we were talking about with the Light Shard and the Khan Wraith, Grimghast Reapers, like when you're throwing like 81 attacks, something crazy like that, Vault of Souls isn't very helpful, because with that amount of attacks, you're going to hope that you've killed whatever you've just thrown 81 attacks into, you'd hope. We're still very much an army that wants to pick our battles, although we can do some crazy things like that and obviously really, really spike our damage. You want to make sure you're getting the right units into the right targets, because at the end of the day, we're not like a unit of, we don't have units of like Chaos Chosen, you know, like 10 Chaos Chosen will just murder whatever they want, or like Varanguard, something like that. You know, Grimghast Reapers still only want to be fighting infantry, etc. Yeah, so the Vault of Souls, cool, but, you know, hard to use. And the Shyish Reaper is the one that I actually, on our first impression, I was like, everyone's going to write this off because, you know, the stat line, I was like, but the respectable 4 damage and +2 attacks, you know, 3 attacks, 3s, 2s, Ren 2, damage 4. If you can put debuffs of saves, obviously this can't have its like rend or anything boosted, it doesn't interact that kind of way, but if you lower the save roll of an enemy, then use it in conjunction with the Shyish Reaper. So if you're using like stun, for example, and then this follows in like a unit of Hex Race, you can essentially make it pseudo Ren 3, because it's, you know, affecting the enemy's save roll, you're not buffing the underspell in any way. It can actually do some surprisingly nice damage. The only thing is it doesn't interact with anything else, like the Wave of Terror, etc., because it's a manifestation. So once it gets stuck into combat, like depending what you charged, and whether you like fluff the roll or not, it can feel good, it can feel bad. It's not the most horrible thing in the world, but like I said, for damage, there's so many other manifestations out there that will either do more like utility damage, so like a Purple Sun, obviously lowering the enemy save by 1, then using something like a stun to lower it by 1 more. So it's like, is that pseudo Ren 2 combined with a unit of Blade Geist better than, you know, bothering with a Shyish Reaper? Probably. Then there's other things out there like Jaws, or, you know, like the swords can just do more damage than Shyish Reaper. So it's like, you don't want to take it just for this. Vault of Souls is also completely replaced by the Malevolent Maelstrom. I butchered that. But again, that's in the manifestation lore with like Purple Sun and Shackles. So it's like, there's a better version of the Vault of Souls. There's a better version of the Terminexus in the Emerald Lifeswarm, and the Shyish Reaper, although it has, you know, some cutesy damage with the 4 damage kind of thing and some nice things, damage isn't something that we really struggle with as Nighthaunt, and you can also get a lot more better damage or support damage out there with the with any other sort of manifestation lore. So it's like, it's nice, and I keep using this one as much as, you know, other things are nicer like the Incarnate, or you know, that, you know, using like the Purple Sun and stuff is generally going to net you more than it will using the Nighthaunt ones. I do keep using these because, well, it just feels nice. It just feels nice having the Nighthaunt ones out there. And yeah, using the Terminexus in conjunction with Deathstalkers is really nice, and just having a way to heal the heroes, heal units like the Black Coach, does feel nice. I just wish it could move and get rid of that roll for 2+, and then the Terminexus would be perfect. And then the other 2 can stay rubbish, and we'll just have a good Terminexus, and we'll have good times. So yeah, that's it about the manifestation lore, and now it's time to get on into some units. Okay, so now we are going to be talking about the units. And first up on our page is Big Papa Nagash himself. Now, Nagash is a unit that I feel we skipped over him in the initial assessment. I'm going to talk about him today, just try and do it as quickly as I can. But I do feel like Nagash is a kind of character that we could spend like an hour just talking about Nagash on his own. But I do really think that he fits into Nighthaunt nicely. He seems best at the moment in OBR because he can do, with his Supreme Lord of the Undead ability, where he gets to replace an entire unit identically to one that was slain. So it's a bit like Spectral Hosts. The trait that we can take, but rather than be a unit with only half of what you had, he sets up a whole unit. So with our example again, 10 Hex Wraiths, if 10 Hex Wraiths get slain outright, he replaces the whole 10 Hex Wraiths, and it makes Nagash like super efficient. In OBR he's really popular because you use him with a unit of Morghasts, reinforce them up to 4, absolutely throw them in. They are a terrifyingly scary unit when they're charged in with like buffed up with their like empowered nanorite weapons on them, and they are just horrific in terms of damage, but they're also like, they're tanky but not like super tanky, so actually getting them killed quite early on after throwing them, like you just Hail Mary throw them in, is quite nice, easily to get them killed, and then you can just replace them with Nagash, which is fantastic. And then if they don't get killed, then they just carry on smashing things up. Which is basically what you want to do with any unit, anytime that you've got Nagash. He's 880 points currently in Nighthaunt, which I think is tied cheapest, because I think he's 880 in Nighthaunt, Soulblight and Flesh Eaters. Then he's 900 in OBR, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, I've only got the Nighthaunt points in front of me, which is definitely 880 in Nighthaunt. But again, like the utility thing, like if you can get 10 Hex Wraiths thrown in and killed, which is, like I said at the start, it's harder to actually get 10 Hex Wraiths killed. It happens, but it's harder to get them killed like early on enough to make this relevant than it seems. But if you do, Hex Wraiths are currently 400 points for a unit of 10, being 880 points in Nagash basically makes Nagash 480 points at that point, which, considering the rest of this War Scroll, is fantastic. It's 18 health with a 3-up save. He doesn't, the stipulation of Ethereal is Nagash is the only thing in our index that doesn't benefit from it, so this will get hit by Rend, but it also means that we actually have something that we can all-out defense on, which is a really weird thing. It's a really weird feeling when you're playing Nighthaunt to say I'm going to use all-out defense. So you can get Nagash to a 2+ save, but he will get affected by Rend. He does have a 5+ ward built in, which is nice. I get, obviously, if he had like it should make sense that he's got obviously like a better ward save than, you know, like he's got the same ward save as a Lord Executioner and he's worse than Lady O, which just feels really wrong considering he's the literal god of death. Like he should have the best ward save, but I get obviously having a 3-up save, and then if he had like a 3 or 4-up ward and 18 health, like it would just, balance wise, would be nuts. So like 5-up ward and 3-up save is nice with 18 health. He's like, at the same time, he's like surprisingly fragile and surprisingly tanky. It's like a really weird combination. So yeah, he doesn't have a way to heal himself, which feels slightly bad in Nighthaunt. You have to use something like a Terminexus or or rallies, or if you're going to bring the other manifestations, the Emerald Life Swarm, are the only ways to heal him up. So he does sometimes like having a Spirit Torment around. It's the one like case of having a Spirit Torment where you get 3 extra rally rolls for being wholly within 12 of the Spirit Torment, I think it is. So then he rolls 9 dice and will heal a wound on every 4+. That feels good. But then obviously you can't be in combat if you need to rally, so it's like, but Nagash is one of those things where, again, because like I said, he's like pseudo tanky, you don't want to be getting him into fights unless he knows he's going to win it. One nice thing about his scroll this time around though is when he's battle damaged, when he has 10 or more damage points, so basically when he's got 8 wounds or less, the only thing that happens to him is he loses 3 from his power level. Now his power level 9, so that means he can cast and unbind up to 9 spells, which is fantastic. Like, he can cast the entire manifestation lore, the entire spell lore, and then still have 3 casts left over. And even if he's battle damaged, he can still do the entire manifestation and spell lore. He doesn't care. And his spell, he can cast this any number of times. So basically, you can try and make 9 casts as much as you can. But his combat attacks are respectable. 3s and 3s on both with 4 attacks is nice. So he's basically 8 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 2. One of them's damage d6 and one of them's a flat 3. So if you spike a couple of those d6s, Nagash can actually do some decent combat. And this isn't a degrading profile at all. So he's always going to be this deadly, whether he's got 1 health left or whether he's full health, which is awesome. His Staff of Power gives him +2 to his casting rolls, so if casting 9 spells wasn't enough, he's +2 to cast, and he's pseudo-immune to miscasts, because you ignore the restriction that would stop him from casting if he miscasts. So he's only +2 to cast when he hasn't miscast. Then as soon as you miscast, you'll take D3 mortal wounds, and usually you won't be able to cast any more for the rest of the turn for that wizard that miscasts, but Nagash just loses his +2 to cast, takes his mortal wounds on the chin, and then carries on like an absolute Chad, casting all the rest of his spells. And that +2 to cast is amazing. We were talking earlier about how the Nighthaunt spells are quite low cast values. The highest one is a 7, so when you have +2 to cast, you're only needing 5s, and that's fantastic. The Invocation Nagash, as we can see here, is also only a 7 to cast, so being able to cast this spell as many times as you want. You can only pick each unit once. That's the stipulation of being able to cast this multiple times. But on a 5, like you can cast Invocation Nagash pretty safely. It's got a wicked range on it. You pick a visible unit wholly within 18 inches of Nagash that hasn't, there you go, so it hasn't been picked to be the target of this spell, and then make the casting roll. If it's an enemy unit, they take D3 mortal wounds. So we can obviously see why you wouldn't want to be able to cast that multiple times on an enemy with a 9 cast wizard, because doing 9 D3 mortal wounds to the same target would be horrifically cruel. And if you pick a friendly death unit, then you can return a number of slain models to the target with a combined health characteristic of up to 3, which is nice. Like, having a flat 3 blanket heal from Nagash is fantastic into units like Hexwraiths, Spirit Hosts, those kind of like higher wound models. They just return a whole model, which is awesome. And if you combine this with Spectral Lore, which does the D6, which you'll be able to cast both because they're 2 different spells, so you'll be able to affect the same unit with both of these. Like a unit of like Bladegeist Revenants or Grimghast Reapers, you bring back 3 of them with the Invocation, then you bring back D6 of them with Spectral Lore. Like, Nagash will heal your units like to no end. You'll be tied, you'll be short 4 units, your board presence will feel really squashed with Nagash. It's something that any time that you take Nagash, as much as I said, like, you can bring his points back with the Supreme Lord of Undead, and the amount of healing that he can do, you can really make him pay for those 880 points that he's going to cost you. But the real challenge is dealing with the rest of the list. Nighthaunt are fairly expensive, especially once you start reinforcing our bigger units. You're paying anywhere between 300 to 400 points for these sort of bigger, better units. And then obviously Nagash nearly costing 1,000 means that you're going to have Nagash and like 2 or 3 decent units, if not like 2 reinforced units and then 2 like chaff units, maybe a small hero, depending what combination you take. But the staying power that Nagash will give you through that healing, basically D6 plus 3 onto a unit, is fantastic. And the fact that you can cast this on multiple units and you have the 9 casts mean that you're going to be putting this basically on all your units that need healing whenever they need it. And if you don't want to do the healing, the other bullet point that you can choose is the target has a 5+ ward until the start of your next turn. So you can really save up on the Discorporate. Discorporate obviously gives us the 5+ for the ward save. So what you can do is you can try and cast the Invocation of Nagash. If it fails, because +2 cast on a 5 is fine, but whether it gets like unbound, maybe you do get unlucky and don't roll that casting value, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to Invocation Nagash my 10 Hexwraiths, give them a 5+ ward. Oh, I've failed it, or I've been unbound. Never mind, I'll just Discorporate that unit instead. So if they don't need healing, you can still put out that 5+ ward save. But the nice thing about this is, like, You can save the CP on Discorporate if you don't need it, because if you get Invocation and Nagash off, but you can put it on multiple units, which is something that we'll struggle with to do with Discorporate, because you don't want to, you know, be burning through so much stuff. So Nagash just really helps that survivability, whether it's healing or handing out ward saves. And if you need the healing, then you still get access to the ward save on that unit anyway if you just Discorporate, don't use that version of Invocation. So there's some real flexibility in there in making your units tanky and survivable, and it's just absolutely awesome. And yeah, so Nagash is perfect for that. And the last thing on his scroll is Hand of Dust. This used to be a spell, so like 3rd and 2nd edition. This will be the bane of many of people. It used to be a spell with a 3-inch range, but the thing is, you'd get spell portals, the end of spell, and then be able to cast it through the portal and then reach 3 inches out the other side. And you can't remember exactly what portals used to be, whether it was 12 inches of each other, I think. You set the first portal up next to the Nagash, and the next portal's 12 inches away, then you reach 3 inch through the portal. So it was like a 15-inch reach on Hand of Dust. It was disgusting. Does the exact same thing. You hide a dice under one of your hands, and if the opponent picks one with a dice, they're fine. If they pick your empty hand, automatically destroyed. Now, that is what you call a deterrent, because this is a rampage now, so you have to do this in combat. And it's the end of any turn, so it's after fighting. So this really deters the enemy from charging like that big scary unit into Nagash. Because if they don't one-shot him and they don't die to the retaliation, then there's still the chance that they're going to get Hand of Dusted. So it's going to, you know, really make the enemy think twice about charging their big, sort of powerful single entity into Nagash, because he can 50-50 punish them. But the nice thing about Hand of Dust no longer being a spell is, sure, you can't cheese it through the portal, you know, and instant kill someone from 15 inches away. But now, because it's not a spell, and there's no requirement, like, you just have to be in combat with someone. So you pick an enemy hero or a monster in combat with them to be the target. I can't fail it, I can't miscast it, there's no unbinding it, it's just going to happen. So Hand of Dust is kind of like being nerfed in the sense that now you have to be, you know, Nagash has to be in that firing line, but at the same time, there's no escape from the Hand of Dust anymore, apart from if you know, don't pick the empty hand. So yeah, Nagash is absolutely fantastic. Like I said, our spell lore is awesome. Nagash is amazing at casting spells. His War Scroll spell is just like chef's kiss. Just, I love the Invocation of Nagash. So much utility in that, from the damage, the ward save, and the healing, combined with the Nighthaunt ones. Like I said, the only thing that really sucks is trying to heal Nagash. He's tanky, but also not the tankiest thing in the world. Like, once you start getting hit by like Ren 3, you start sweating. And if you get hit by like a lot of things or a lot of high damage things, then yeah, it doesn't feel great in that regard. But if, you know, you're playing Nighthaunt and you bring the Nighthaunt spells, like I said, the Terminexus, the one thing it does have going for it is the fact that you can put it down in combat, so don't mind that so much. But rallies, Spirit Torments, and then either of the healing ender spells, whether you've got the Terminexus or the Life Swarm, are like Nagash's best friends. But Nagash on the whole, I think in Nighthaunt, although again he's better in OBR, purely just because of the way that, you know, the Morghast are at the moment with his return thing. But in Nighthaunt, he's perfectly usable. I haven't actually played Nagash in 4th yet, but it's something that I really want to try. Next up, we have Lady Ollander, the Mortarch of Grief herself. And anyone that's, you know, watched the channel for a while or knows me knows that Lady O is like one of my personal favourite Nighthaunt units of all time. She's pretty much in every list that I've ever written ever, unless I'm doing like a weird kind of off gimmicky thing, or it's been in the Nagash list. Like, Lady O has always been like the first name on the team sheet, so to speak. Just really like the way that she used to play, and her lore and just the model, and it just doesn't feel right leaving home without her. But I have to be honest, in 4th edition, she's great. This War Scroll is awesome. She's in a lot of like competitive lists at the moment. Like I said, Nighthaunt really wants to be piling on the pressure from the get-go, and she does some really cool things that really elevate that. But I feel that this iteration of her in 4th has been like the most flat version of her. She lost the Veil, so she's got this like cool shooting attack now. Ren 3 d6 damage is awesome, but it's only 1 attack. It should shoot in combat. That's something that I said like the first time round. You know, it's 2s and 2s, Ren 3, which sounds great. You can crit auto wound it as well if you roll a 6 to hit, fine. But yeah, as soon as you're in combat, like she doesn't want to be in combat because she's not a great combat piece. That's not where her sort of abilities lie, but it's just the fact that like if she gets caught up in something, then all of a sudden you're having to use, like if she's in a precarious situation, then you have to use Deathstalkers on her to get her out, and then you're not using it on a unit to further your board space. Just to like, you know, if you want to do your shooting attack, or again get her out of dodge without taking the mortal wounds, doesn't feel too great. Where she used to have the veil, where she would just pick a unit within 12 inches, roll a dice, and on a 2+ they take that many mortal wounds, and she would heal herself as well, which really sucks to have lost. Like, she doesn't have this self-sustain anymore, so she wants to be kind of in the thick of things because she wants to be supporting things up close and personal. If you want to make the most out of the Mortarch of Grief passive, then obviously you're going to have to be within 12 inches of the enemy to lower their control score. Her other two things aren't too bad. No Rest for the Wicked. I say aren't too bad. These are the things that make her absolutely amazing. No Rest for the Wicked is a once per game heal where you return to every model on the table. This doesn't have a range. They don't have to be visible to her. It's just Nighthaunt units on the battlefield. And they return D3 plus 3 number of slain models with the combined health characteristic of D3 plus 3. When I first read that, I did think it was just slain models, and I got very excited at the idea of healing up to like 6 Hex Wraiths, etc. But it's not. It's D3 plus 3, so it's a minimum of 4, maximum of 6, which is still going to be, you know, you're still going to be able to return like a Hex Wraith, Spirit Host, those kind of things. Heal like Dreadblade Harrows, etc. But it's the fact that it's board wide and it's to every single unit. So what you'll see a lot of with like Lady O lists is like you'll take your big hammers, use your unit of Hex Wraiths, and then like either Revenants or Grimghast, whatever your kind of flavour is, maybe Harridans. You'll absolutely punch them forward, charge on into the enemy, do as much damage as you can early on. Hopefully weather some of the storm. It's inevitable that you're going to take some casualties on the way in. Then if you get the double, and you can manage to go twice, then Lady O will pop her thing, you do the big heal. She's a 2-cast wizard as well, so she'll pop her heal. You'll hopefully get a Spectral Lore off, so you'll do even more healing. You've used something like a Shade Mist or that in the turn prior, so you've made yourself more tanky. Discorporate, so hopefully your casualties, although you're going to have a few, aren't too many. And her No Rest for the Wicked and a Spectral Lore will be just enough to topple your units back up to full, or near to full. And obviously, when you've gone into the enemy with 10 Hex Wraiths and like 20 Revenants, 20 Harridans, whatever, you've hopefully like wiped a unit or two of theirs off, which then makes them feel like really under pressure because they've lost a couple of units. Your units are all still on the table, and now they've all healed back up, and you're there doing your ghostly cackle like, ha 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 ha, Nighthaunt. Oh god, I can't believe I just did that. That's staying in the video, it's fine. So yeah, so like it's an absolutely amazing ability for that kind of thing. It plays into what we want to be doing. It's really cool once per battle. If you could do that every turn, it would just be absolutely broken. And Grief Stricken is probably like the best spell, even better than the entire spell lore, even though it's tied to her. Pick an enemy unit within 12 inches, again, not wholly within 12, so you've only got to clip one model, which is perfect. Casting value of 6, which is great. And you ignore the positive modifiers to hit rolls, wound rolls, and save rolls for the rest of the turn. So if you manage to shriek on them, stun them, any of those debuffs, then the opponent is not going to be able to counteract them in any way. No all-out defense is going to help because they can't do any positive modifiers. That's no all-out defense, no all-out attack, anything like that. Whether they've got a hero nearby that's maybe giving them all +1 to wound. Not for the rest of this turn, thank you very much. And again, using the command Magical Intervention to cast spells in the opponent's turn, putting Grief Stricken out, because the only bad thing about it is it lasts till the end of the turn. This is something like we said with like Shade Mist, where Shade Mist rolls over. Grief Stricken doesn't, which is fair enough because it's absolutely amazing spell. But using Magical Intervention and -1 to cast, so this becomes a 7, is still, you know, bang on average of getting this spell off. So you can double tap Grief Stricken for a command point, and it's absolutely worth it all the time, unless you like desperately need like that spectral law or that shade mist that maybe didn't go off. Grief Stricken is a perfect target for magical intervention and being able to put that onto the enemies. She's got the 4+ ward built in, which is great. Means you don't need like Spirit Host around her to keep her alive. She is the tankiest tank hero in the book. The 4+ ethereal 4+ ward. So her 7 wounds do actually go a long way. But yeah, without the stealth, like it used to feel like she'd float around in the middle of your lines. She's just doing constant chip damage with those mortal wounds, which is what her horrifying visage is supposed to do, the shooting attack. It just doesn't kind of land the same. You know, just doing like a d6 damage shooting attack. It just I don't know, the veil just felt more, had more presence, more weight on the table, which is what I really enjoyed with Lady O. And she'd be healing herself, so she's like self-sustaining, as well as using her 2 cast to buff the troops around her. It just made her feel more like impactful in that way, like long term, because once she goes in, she pops No Rest for the Wicked, using Grief Stricken. Like, yes, she's massively impactful. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not underweighting her War Scroll at all. She actually got a points increase. She's now 310 points. I think she was 300 when the index dropped, so she's gone up only slightly. But like, I'm not like underplaying the fact that this isn't a bad War Scroll. She's amazing, don't get me wrong. It just doesn't feel the same. And I'm sure there might be some like long-term Nighthaunt players out there who've used Lady O a bunch, might feel the same way. Maybe it's just me. Who knows? But yeah, so she's an amazing War Scroll. But I do feel like when you compare her to other Mortarks, you look at someone like Neferata in Soulblight Gravelords, who, ironically, her spell is the thing that makes a unit, so their saves are unmodifiable in a negative manner. You put that on like 10 Blood Knights and then you charge them in. She leads the charge with these now pseudo-ethereal Blood Knights that are on like a 3-up save. And it just feels like you kind of, you know, that's super impactful. It feels awesome. And she's doing that like every turn. It feels like a big threat. It feels like, you know, you've got that Mortark that's chasing you down. Arcan the Black for OBR. Amazing spellcaster. 3-cast wizard with like +1 built in. But he's got Curse of Years on his War Scroll. So like he can, every now and then, he'll just blow up a unit on his own. Like, it feels kind of cool. Obviously Catacross, the big big leader of the OBR. You get that presence of a Mortark for the entire thing. Like, he's just there and he's commanding all the troops. He buffs all the ranges of all the things. He gives everyone positive control score. He's handing out like +1 to save to like 3 different units. Like, you put him in the middle of the army and you feel like he's there. Lady O, once she's done her 1-turn healing trick and she's there casting spells, it's like, you can also kind of get that from Reikenor. Sure, you lose out on Grief Stricken, which is an absolutely amazing spell. But like, the Mortark of Grief ability and the shooting attack just doesn't feel Mortarky enough, I guess, is my complaint. I know I'm going on for a while with this rant on Lady O, but like I said, she's like one of my favourite things, has been for a very, very long time. Ever since this model dropped, I've pretty much been playing it all the time, as much as I can. Like I said, unless I'm doing like a SKU list or something. So yeah, it just, I wish Lady O would have more of a weighty feel to her. Like, she feels like she should put her presence down on the table a lot more than just, I'm -3 to your control score and I have a cool spell. So yeah, bring back the veil, bring back the veil. Let's move on before we spend an hour just talking about Lady O herself. So next up we have Kurdos Valentian, the Craven King himself, and this is one of the very disappointing War Scrolls. So like Lady O, I know it made it sound really negative, but she is fantastic. So we've got Nagash, Lady O, tick, tick, both awesome, both do great, great things. Kurdos is the first one where I struggle to find a positive with Kurdos. You know, he's supposed to be this big, scary combat hero, and he just doesn't do it for me. The 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, Rend 2, damage 3, is not as nice as it sounds. Like I said, there's a lot of debuffs going around the game at the moment. There's a lot of easy, like -1 to hit, -1 to wound. So even just taking him down to like 4s and 4s. Flat 3 damage is nice. but we already do. Like I said, our units now feel a lot more self-sustainable than they ever have. Like in terms of putting out damage, our units do so much damage. Like our heroes used to be the big support pieces, so Kurdos always felt weird in that kind of space that, you know, he's not a support hero, he's meant to be a combat hero, but his combat just isn't combat-y enough for 4th edition. A lot of the things that are out there doing lots of damage, you look at things like Varengard, Varengard, Chosen, even within our own book, like 20 Revenants, 20 Grimghast, those kind of things. Like Kurdos's damage, especially for his points, he got points decrease, but he's still 190 points. It's a lot. Like you can still take 5 more Hex Wraiths, you could take for 10 more points, you could take 10 Bladegeist Revenants and actually save 10 points. And it's like you'd probably get more utility damage out of those. His ability is okay. You're not going to win any games off the back of this. Like if this wins you a game, your opponent must be like throwing a Hail Mary kind of last play. That command point is, you know, they're probably already losing heavily to try and win off the back of one command. And it's also on a dice roll as well, you know, on a 3+, so it's not guaranteed. Third of the time it's going to let you down. It's a neat trick, but, you know, it's not worth 200 points worth of trick. And it's also wholly within 12, so you have to be close to the enemy that wants to use that command anyway. The thing that needs the command might be on the other side of the table. The one cool thing he does have is, surprisingly, and I missed this on the first thing, but he is control 5. A lot of our other big heroes, like Lady O, and that's only control 2. He's control 5. So if you combine him with like some Dreadblade Harrows, when they charge in, they give +3 to Nighthaunt units around them when on the turn that they charge. Like you can make Kurdos up to control 8, and that really sneaks in some like weight on the objective control. Again, it's not necessarily needed because for 10 points cheaper, you just take 10 Bladegeist and they're worth 10 on the objective instead of 5. But yeah, so that's the thing that's going for him. It's the thing that he doesn't need. And yeah, he just doesn't do enough for me in this index. So big swing and a miss with that mace, I'm afraid, fella. Next up is Alrich the Drowner, and Alrich is one of the newer heroes, really cool, and he is awesome. I was a bit unsure, to be honest, when this first came out. The passage through the underworlds, your movement phase once per turn. If he's not in combat, he picks a friendly Nighthaunt unit that's also not in combat, wholly within 12 inches. You remove him and that unit from the battlefield. You set them both up again, wholly within 6 inches of each other and more than 7 inches from all enemy units. He plays really nicely into that thing I was talking about with Lady O. It's one of the lists that we see quite a lot at the moment, will be like Lady O and Alrich. And again, you take a unit of like Hex Wraiths and then a 20-man unit of Revenants, Harridans, Reapers, whichever your flavour of the week is. The Hex Wraiths, you can use something like a Terminexus to boost them up. You use the Deathstalkers battle formation, so they're now like running and charging. Those Hex Wraiths will fly across the table and basically be guaranteed to charge whatever the hell they wanted. Alrich will then teleport himself and your 20-man unit of chosen flavour within 7 inches of the enemy. You could use the Terminexus to buff the unit that you then teleport with, so when you drop outside of 7 inches you're now +1 to your charges, so you're now only needing a 6 to charge. And if you've used the Hex Wraiths and moved in such a way, and you're doing this in the early game, usually the enemy will have a couple of units next to each other, so whether they want to redeploy one or not is up to them. But the chances are if they redeploy a unit, then there's another unit that you're easily going to be in range of anyway. And you can use the Hex Wraiths to move up and just kind of, you know, box the enemy in 2 different ways, whether you teleport off on the side or you just dump them both in front of the enemy. You set up that alpha really hard with the sort of, whether you auto run the Hex Wraiths, you know, they're getting that +6 to their move, and then they can run and charge anyway. Alrich set up with the Terminexus, again with Lady O in the list. You charge those 2 units in, you wreck face, and then when the counter comes back in, Lady O will pop her heal. Everybody's happy, everybody's healthy, well, for as much as undead ghosts can be. And then, yeah, so Alrich just really helps set up that kind of ramped alpha strike pressure that we really, really like. And he himself actually isn't a bad fighter. We were just talking about how bad Kurdos is as a combat hero. He has the same amount of attacks as Kurdos. He's 1 less to hit. He has the same wound, same rend, and he does D3 damage instead of a flat 3, but considering one's the big combat hero and the other one's a guy that teleports around with a wooden oar, I'll let you make your minds up about that, which one is more useful. And because also Alrich drops within 7 inches as well as the unit that he teleports, depending what you're teleporting, you could set it up so Alrich is also the 7 inches away, tries to charge on in. He is a war machine and obviously a hero as well, so you can choose between stunning and petrifying, depending on what things that you've charged in. Usually you want to keep Alrich back, you know, get him to teleport something in, keep him as that kind of second wave thing, and then there's something else in your list somewhere else that's not those 10 hex race or that 20-man unit that he'll then want to teleport the next turn somewhere else and be able to provide that pressure on the other side of the table when you really need it to. But like I said, even if he charges in, you can use him to get the strike last, and then the other unit can go in and do whatever they need to do. And yeah, he's not terrible in a fight, but it will shut off the passage through the underworld if he gets stuck in combat, or the unit that he wants to be fighting with, it gets stuck in combat. So yeah, Alrich is absolutely awesome. Next up, Reikenor the Grimhailer. This is one that we praised as like one of the most improved profiles from 3rd going over to 4th. Nothing's really changed with our boy Reikenor. He's gone up a few points, I believe. He's now currently sitting at 240. And I think when we've last reviewed this, he was 210. So he's only gone up 30 points, which, to be fair, with how much of a glow up this War Scroll has had, is an absolute steal, to be honest, still at 240 points. I really like Reikenor. There's a lot of wizards and priests going around in the game at the moment. So his Grim Justice, because of it's just the way that like manifestations work, because they're free, everybody's got a wizard, at least one wizard in their list. So this is like basically always useful, because someone, you know, everyone wants to be making use of the free manifestations. So having that Grim Justice is awesome. But even when you don't factor this in, like his base profile just being 5 attacks, 3s, 3s, Rend 2, and with a 12-inch move, fly, +1 damage on the charge, like he's always pretty much going to be on that, choosing his engagements. So, you know, you can read across that. And again, I'm picking on Kurdos now because he's supposed to be the big combat guy. But Reikenor has an extra attack, same hit, same wound, same rend. He's 1 less damage, but then when he charges, like I said, with a 12-inch move and fly, like really easy to get Reikenor in on the charge. Then he has the 3 attack, he has the 3 damage too. So he's actually better than Kurdos in all the ways, even without his +1 hit and wound built in against an enemy wizard or priest. He's just got like 1 better attack and the same stats on the charge. So make it make sense. But yeah, Corpse Candle's absolutely fantastic. One thing that I did miss when I first reviewed this that I caught on really quick is this is any hero phase. So the Corpse Candles, it's a fantastic way to be able to put a mortal wound onto the enemy in their turn. So this can buff up like Harridans. Harridans really love having Reikenor around, getting off that 1 piece of damage, making something bleed, or picking like a 1 wound enemy to kill something if they don't have a mortal save. Set up the Harridans really nicely. But even then, you can just buff his casting for that turn. Then when you use Magical Intervention, he's still +1 to cast. So basically countering that out, which depending on what spell you need can be really, really handy. And yeah, he just absolutely loves those kind of things. He's also cavalry as well, so he has the choice between petrifying and stunning, which is basically the 2 best things. Wraithstorm is an awesome spell because it's just this is just a flat D3 mortal wounds. There's none of that needing a 2+ roll to do that kind of thing, and then seeing what mortal wounds are left over. It's just you can do anything between 1 and 3. And again, if you're targeting those 1 wound things, then you can do anywhere between 1 or 2 and 6. So that's really, really nice and just helps thin down sort of enemy units that way. And Corpse Candles is absolutely fantastic. Using the Terminexus, sort of, one thing I like to do is like if you cast the Terminexus out next to a unit that wants to use it for the run and charge early on, Reikenor will punch himself in the face to take a damage. So, you know, he gets his +1 to his casting and his +1 to his power level, makes him a 2-cast wizard. Then that turn, after you've cast the spells, you move up near the Terminexus. So then when it's your second turn, you can then use the heal off the Terminexus again after you've punched yourself with the corpse candles, because you might have potentially taken a couple of wounds. Then you heal back up to full, and then you can fly off into the sort of turns 3 onwards for the mid game, nicely healed up and not too damaged by your own corpse candles by that point, which obviously always feels bad when you've only got 7 wounds and you have to hurt yourself to get the buff. But it's such a cool buff that it's definitely worth it to be able to pile on that magical pressure. Okay, so next up we have the Scriptor Mortis, and this is probably the only other thing that I'm going to bully. Not as hard as Kurdos, because yeah, he let us down. The Scriptor Mortis is the thing that I think everyone wants to be awesome. I tried so much to make this work when this first came out, and like we weren't too sure of, you know, getting used to the interactions of the once per turn armies and what this all meant. You can't even use like multiple Scriptor Mortises, because regardless of how many things are sentenced, you can only roll this once per turn. So even if you had 2 scriptors on the board, you could choose between which scriptor is going to be trying to use the abilities, but between them they can only use each of these once. So yeah, you can only have 1 scriptor on the table, and as we were talking about before, like the range on this is nice. It's an enemy unit within 18, but you have to roll a 3+ to sentence them. Then you have to roll a 4+ to use the Judge, Jury and Executioner to deal any damage, and then the damage is tied to the battle round, so it's only from like turn 4 onwards that really you're going to do any juicy damage, because you know, what's the point of doing like 1 mortal wound to 1 unit? Sure, it's nice, like in theory you could have 5 units, and then on turn 5 you can get all 5 of them to do 5 mortal wounds, and you do 25 mortal wounds on the last turn. But to be honest, like by the turn 5, like if he's still alive, or there's still 5 things on the table to be able to be sentenced, and you've rolled the 3+4, like he just spikes super hard. Yeah, he just needs a complete like War Scroll rewrite. Like this just needs to not be locked behind so many dice. I get obviously they're trying to get it so he doesn't like steamroll too much, but then yeah, maybe just not make him do this, just let him do something else. And yeah, it's nice that he's a cursed soul, so you don't have to waste a drop on him. He's 120 points though, and he doesn't really do very much. And it's a shame that there's no artifacts, like you can't turn him into a wizard, he can't do anything else. So like he doesn't absorb any of the traits or anything nicely. I guess best case scenario is he's good for spectral hosts, you know, because he's going to be wanting to stay back so he doesn't die, and he can just pick things from 18 inches away and try and sentence them. But at the same time, there's just so much better heroes out there, and they can also just take spectral hosts. So yeah, Scriptor Mortis is still disappointing, just needs a complete rewrite. Unfortunately, it doesn't combo well with anything, just does his own thing, and he doesn't do it very well, so sad. Tomb Banshee. Tomb Banshee is one I was really excited for this scroll, and when I first started writing lists, like I said, the Cavalcade of Death was something that I really tried to write, and I tried to write like it was like a Handmaidens themed list, so it was like Lady O, Tomb Banshee, all the Mirmon Banshees, Dreadscythe Harridans, a couple of Black Coaches, and just been like, yeah, I was like, I'm going to have all the sort of handmaiden kind of things. We're all going to get buffed up by the coaches. The Tomb Banshee is now awesome. She does lots of cool interactive things with the other Banshees, and it's going to be like, you know, the handmaidens of the Mortarch of Grief, and they're all going to come out screaming and doing cool stuff. And to be honest, the Tomb Banshee, on paper, again, she's way much better than like her 3rd edition counterpart, because she does like cool things, but it's kind of like gimmicky in the sense that she's 150 points. She did recently get added to being a cursed soul, which she wasn't before, so you'd have to use a drop on her. Now you don't, which is nice, but at the same time, she just kind of isn't worth the 150 points. You can just get 10 Grimgrass Reapers and do way much more. Her like thing of shutting off commands is again a bit like the Terminix. It's behind a dice roll. Sure, it's a 2+, so it's going to happen more often than not, but all it does is turn off commands. Lady O could just use Grief Stricken on that big key unit, which would basically do kind of the same thing. Obviously, not all commands like buff stats and that kind of thing, so This has slightly more utility to it, but more often than not, commands are going to be, you know, you're all out attacks, you're all out defenses, those kind of things. So Lady O's spell will just do that, and then Lady O also does like 1,000,001 things more. And the Cacophony of Sorrow, so the ignoring the positive modifiers to control scores of enemy units within 12 inches of her is cool, but then she has to be within 12 inches of some Mirmor Banshees, and then also wholly within 12 inches of the enemy, so it's like a bubble within a bubble. So between the two, it's like And also for the Ghostly Howl, a thing I didn't point out just a minute ago is you actually have to do damage with her Scream, which is a D3 attack, so you can have one attack and potentially only do 1 damage, which is easy to save or ward off. The only nice thing is she shoots in combat, so something that Lady O should maybe take some notes from her fellow Tomb Banshees. And it has the same stat line as her actual Chill Dagger, so once she's in combat, you can basically say that like this stat line is between 4 and 6 attacks, essentially. But yeah, the Howl and the Cacophony of Sorrow rules just aren't enough, I think, to warrant spending 150 points on her. But it's fine. It's fine. It's like, it's much better than just having a blank war scroll and her not being able to do anything or like be in and amongst the other Banshee units. So thematically, it's really, really cool. It's fun, again, for those kind of friendly themed lists or non-competitive environments. Like, she's not a complete waste of space on the table anymore, but from a competitive element, there's just, yeah, so much better. And I've tried it a few times, and she just doesn't feel as impactful as maybe you would hope that she would actually be with all these new rules, which is a shame. But yeah, fun for friendly. Knight of Shrouds on foot. This is something, again, I was really excited for this. The Infantry Overseer. This is basically a rule that's in like every army has this guy now. It's like that kind of foot hero that will then that will fight and then pull in. So for this one, it's a Nighthaunt infantry unit that hasn't fought this turn, and they'll be able to fight immediately after him. And the nice thing is they also get +1 to their hit rolls when they do. So it's like the Knight of Shrouds will charge in. The thing that you do is you want to combo that with your Petrify. So he'll charge in, he'll make the enemy strike last, he fights, and then you pull in your unit to then fight after him, which admittedly, because they get to auto fight, kind of cancels out the benefit of like making the enemy strike last, because you would be fighting before them anyway, unless they, you know, have something to strike that out. If they've got always strikes first and you make them strike last, it cancels out and goes back to normal turn order. So it's situationally handy in that kind of thing, but it doesn't come up all too often. So it's like Infantry Overseer and Petrify kind of don't really go hand in hand very well, but it is a nice way to get +1 to hit without having to use all-out attack, so you can save yourself some command points for that. The Knight of Shrouds on foot has gone down a lot in points. He's now 120 points. I think he was 140 points when we first saw him. But the thing is, like, he takes up a whole drop of his own, and his combat attacks, the Sword of Stolen Hours. It's nice that he heals himself, but he's only 5 wounds, so most of the time when he gets attacked, he'll just get 1 shot anyway, and he doesn't really do too much on damage front. The 4+ to hit really hurts him, because there's a lot of -1 to hits going around in like AoE bubbles and that kind of thing, or targeting stuff. So if he gets hit by any of that, he goes to 5s all of a sudden, and then he's just swinging and missing. And again, the Infantry Overseer thing is nice, but there's like, you know, you can get the strike last with any hero, and sure, you miss out on the +1 to hit, but there's a bunch of other combos that we'll see when we get to those heroes that can just potentially make more damage, and then you can just spend the command point on all-out attack anyway. So you plan ahead, make sure you save a CP, and you can do the same kind of thing, but just better. So again, it's one of those, and I absolutely love this model. When this came out in the Malayan Portents campaign in 2nd edition, I think it was, end of 2nd edition, I want to say, or no, it was like halfway through. Or maybe in the start of 2nd edition. No, I'm thinking of, yeah, because 1st edition was the, yeah, so it was when the, yeah, Malayan Portents came out. And yeah, like, absolutely love this model. It's up there as one of like my all-time favourite Nighthaunt models ever, the Knight of Shrouds on foot. So slightly disappointing, and I think it's the fact that the artifacts are just so-so. Like, there's nothing to really give him that really benefits him very much. So yeah, is what it is, but we'll see what happens when the tome drops, hopefully. Night Shrouds on Steed suffers basically from the same thing. It was cool to see them like split these things out, because I think in the 3rd edition tome, the Night Shrouds, whether it was on Steed or on foot, had like the same command ability that they could do. But now it's like, where the foot one is the infantry overseer, this one is the cavalry overseer. So he does the same thing, gives you the +1 to hit, you fight after he fights, but you pick a war machine or cavalry unit to pile in and fight after him. The same kind of stipulations like apply though. The thing is, you're charging in with cavalry, so the cavalry can already do stun, which is, you know, him being a cavalry himself is something that's like, oh, I can now do this, because the foot Knight of Shrouds can't. He's only an infantry guy. He can't outnumber anyone, so he can't shriek. So you can basically only petrify with the foot Knight of Shrouds, unless you go and take the terrifying entity, so then he can choose a different aura of dread. But the cavalry, the ethereal steed Knight of Shrouds, has the cavalry keyword, so he can either stun or petrify. But if you're using cavalry overseer, you're charging in with something else that can already stun. So again, it's the same thing. You can petrify with this guy, make them fight after you, but then you've made the enemy fight last anyway. His attacks are no better, other than he gets the extra horse attacks. And the thing is, he's crazily more expensive. He's 190 points, same points as Kurdos. Again, we're picking on Kurdos. It's the theme of this video. Apparently, we're going to pick on Kurdos a lot. But yeah, for 190 points, I think you just spend the extra 10 points. You take five extra Hex Wraiths. Obviously, the Hex Wraiths can do impact hits. They're just as fast. They do more attacks. Doesn't matter if they're not fighting first, because you just have more models. And yeah, I think that's more beneficial than being able to do the sort of pile in and fight, because any hero can petrify the enemy. The Hex Wraiths themselves will be able to do the stun, and then if you really want to, you just think ahead, spend the CP, all-out attack, get +1 to hit anyway. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing. And again, the Night Shrouds on Ethereal Steed in the 3rd edition tome used to benefit really nicely from some of the artifacts and things. There was a build where you could make him like you used to be able to heal his health above his starting limit, and then you'd have the Soulfire Ring as well. So he would like heal himself up to full. He'd be increasing his maximum health, and then whenever he took damage, it did mini AoE mortal wound explosions based off of his maximum health. None of that kind of thing exists anymore, so no fun. But one nice thing I will give to him is that, like, obviously being a single entity cavalry hero is being able to get petrify or stun off in a tight gap, whether you're trying to like thread the needle of like between enemy units. That might be a really small application for him, but again, just probably better off with 5 Hex Wraiths and just doing the same thing anyway. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully the tome maybe give us more options, more commands, more artifacts that will make both the variants of the Night Shrouds more appealing to take. Because again, from a thematic thing, there's lots of things you can build, lots of lists around them, but from a competitive element, I do think they've fallen off, and their utility you can just build elsewhere anyway. Next up, Mr. Kernwraith. Now, we kind of already spoiled the trick with this guy. We spoke about him and Grimghast Reapers. He gives them +1 attack while they are wholly within 12 inches of him, and while he is in combat, so he'll have to be within 3 inches of the enemy, while also wholly within 12 inches of the Grimghast Reapers, for them to benefit from that +1 attack. But that is just so good. He recently also got the thing, he's only 130 points, so like you compare him to the Tomb Banshee, he's 20 points cheaper. He's only 10 points more than the Knight of Shrouds that we just saw, the foot version anyway. He's 60 points cheaper than the mounted version. He's got decent attacks, it's nothing to write home about, but like 6 of them, again he suffers from the 4+ to hit, but like 4+, 3+, -1, 2 is like a standard foot hero usually with 5 attacks. But it's the fact that you can still do what we've been talking about all video long so far. Best thing to do is keep your Kernwraith near your Grimghast Reapers. Keep him towards the back, so he's, you know, if the Grimghast Reapers get charged, the Kernwraith is safe on the enemy turn. Then on your turn, you charge your Kernwraith in, you use Petrify, you make the enemy strike last. Then he's going to be in combat with a striking last enemy. He's going to be wholly within the Grimghast Reapers. The Grimghast Reapers are going to do their joyous ghostly scream because they're going to benefit from the eager death dealer's ability, and then they're going to get extra attacks. Give him the light shard artifact, and then he gives them all +2 attacks, and then everybody is happy while you're sitting in a pile of enemy bodies that have all been chopped up very nicely and efficiently by your Grimghast Reapers. So yeah, Kernwraith, absolutely awesome. He recently got the buff. No, just double checked, he's always been a cursed soul, so he also fits inside of a regiment. So if you take like Lady O, and then you can put the Kernwraith inside like Lady O's regiment when you're list building, so he doesn't actually make you take any more drops, which on a competitive front a lot of people like to take really low drop lists so they can help decide the opening turn order. And again, he's buffing up one of the preferably like best infantry units we have in the entire index, so just win, win, win for Mr. Kernwraith. Next up is the Krulghast Cruciator. This is a unit that admittedly I am not very big on, but I've got a lot of people in the Lakey Wargames Discord that tell me that they do really like this. A good friend of the channel, Fitzy, I'll link, he does really awesome blogs for Warhammer, I want to say. I might have got that completely wrong. But he does like really awesome Nighthaunt blogs, does like when he goes to tournaments and events and things, writes things up. And the Krulghast is something that he always tells me is like really cool, like some forbidden tech. And again, people in the Lakey Wargames Discord also tell me that the Cruciator is something that I'm sleeping on. His whole thing is you ignore the first damage point for each friendly Nighthaunt unit wholly within 12 inches of him for each phase. So like if you took a wound from a spell in the hero phase, you ignore the first wound. Then if you got shot, you'd ignore the first wound or the first damage point allocated. In the shooting phase, again for combat, end of turn, like any phase, and it's for all units wholly within 12. So you could shrug off quite a few things. I recently watched a battle report on Season of War, where they had the ogres with all the Stonehorns, and they've got the basically a passive. All the Stonehorn guys have a passive that is basically the same thing as the Cruciator. They all ignore the first point of damage in every phase, and it did rack up quite a lot. I was really surprised. It was against Lumineth, so they had like Teclis and Sentinels, so they're doing like damage in all phases, which is what Lumineth like to do and really chip you down. So it was a lot more impactful then, I think, for them. But again, the Cruciator could, you know, potentially, it's something I haven't really played him. His shooting attack is like nothing to write home about, neither is his combat attack. He surprisingly does have an extra health compared to a lot of our other foot heroes for no apparent reason. A lot of things are 5 and he just happens to have 6, which is fine because obviously that just makes him twice as more, well, not twice as more tanky, but you know, the extra health is always just nice to have. So this might be something that's worth playing around with. Again, I haven't really used it, so it's only from me speculating on paper. But the nice thing is he does pair nicely with Reikenor. When Reikenor wants to try and hurt himself with a corpse candle, you can ignore that allocated damage. So it's like it can help him stop him punching himself in the face so much and taking that damage. But the Cruciator is, I'm just trying to find his points. Can't see him on the list. It's going to be on the list. I'm looking right at it. There it is, 150 points. And he's not a cursed soul, so he will make an extra drop in the regiments for your list building. So that's something to bear in mind. 150 points isn't like the worst in the world. But yeah, I guess it depends. It depends on the matchup, because if you're going to take a lot of chip damage, again, something like Lumineth that wants to hurt you in all the phases, this can add up. If you're playing Reikenor, you can get more value out of him that way as well. So yeah, I think that's the thing with the Krulghast. He's very situational, because if someone's only going to want to hurt you in one phase, say you're playing Khorne, you know, doesn't really want to do any magic. Like, sure, they have a few prayers and things that can damage you, but like they basically just want to hurt you as much as possible in the combat phase. Or Slaves of the Darkness, who just basically punch you, a few spells, but like no real heavy shooting. Then yeah, Cruciator doesn't get as much value as he would against someone like Lumineth, who want to hurt you in all the phases. So maybe it's not as bad. I think it's not as bad as I thought, but it's also not, you know, 1000% efficient kind of thing, unless you're building into it and matchup dependent. So yeah, let me know what you think about the Cruciator in the comments below. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Next up, Lord Executioner, and this has been one. This is like a family favorite since the edition dropped. We thought he was going to be good, thought he was going to be spicy, and oh boy, did he deliver. He is gone up in points these days. He's now 170 points. He was 150 when this dropped, but he is a cursed soul, so he fits nicely inside of a regiment. That was a thing we saw a lot at the start of 4th edition. It was Lady O, Reikenor, Lord Executioner inside of the thing, bunch of units, 2 drops, cool. And yeah, Lord Executioner, absolutely fantastic. This debuff, you know, -1 to the attacks characteristics of a whole unit. Again, just using Nighthaunt as an example, I'm assuming that you guys are familiar with Nighthaunt, coming here and watching this. So like, say like you got your Grimghast Reapers or your Bladegeist Revenants, you know, those units that have got decent amount of attacks through volume, then all of a sudden someone hits you with the -1 to attack. Like, that's a lot, especially if you're not getting any of your positives. So like Grimghast Reapers are 2 attacks base. That's half of your potential damage output just gone on a 2+. And again, that's a roll. It's not 100% guaranteed. We spoke about it a few times. There's quite a few things like the Terminexus and that need a 2+ to do something. So rolling that 1 does feel bad. But in this situation, you know, getting that debuff off is nice. You combine this with all the other debuffs we get. So if you want to stun, shriek, then you use Lady O's spell to stop the enemy being able to get any pluses to them. Then you make them -1 to attack. It's just, yeah, you can really, really pile on the misery to your opponent's like big shiny unit by making them -1 to hit, -1 to wound, -1 to save, plus your rend, and then also like -1 to attack, and a way that the enemy can't even buff any of that back up. Yeah, you can really make their shiny unit feel not so shiny anymore. So yeah, and then the other thing, the reducing heroes control score from 5 is like just cute. It's kind of like cherry on the top. Some big scary hero like an Archeon or someone comes flying into you, you hit him with this, making Archeon -1 to attack and -5 to control score is quite funny. So yeah, it's a nice cherry on the top, but the main thing is that -1 to attacks. And he's no jokes either when he swings, especially if you go into that said hero, then being at Rend 3 plus any other sort of debuffs that you can stack on them, 5 attacks is very nice. And he just has his 5+ ward compared to everyone else who sits on a 6+. So yeah, it's just really, really nice. 170 points these days. Like I say, it's getting a bit more expensive, but I still think as long as you get them into the right target that has multiple attacks and, you know, can really blunt the offensive of the enemy, he can still really, really be worth it even at those points. And in a list where you're going to be taking something like a Lady O, an Alrich or Lady O and Reikenor, for example, he's a perfect sort of third hero, cursed soul, with that nice utility, who then also can take your command trait and your artifact. So he'll be doing the spectral hosts and the light shard. He takes them up really nicely as well. Dreadblade Harrows. So this was the one, they were used to be a hero unit and now they're a unit. And these guys were broken on launch. Last time that we spoke about these guys, we really underestimated the Phantasmal Discorporation, which they can use now only in your movement phase, which is how it should have been. Before, this said any movement phase, so you could use this in the enemy's turn. You could do some really horrific things, like you can reinforce these up. They come in 2s, so you reinforce them up to a unit of 4, and then they could like string out in a long line, or you take 2 units of 2, they string out on a long line, box your opponent in like to wherever they've deployed, and then your opponent obviously can't get within 3 of you because without carrying a charge, which they can't do in their movement or hero phase move or anything like that. And then, yeah, then when it was their movement phase, like after they've moved and tried to have to come round your unit, then you just teleport away. Just teleport away. And for things like battle tactics, you know, you move up, you take the flanks, then you teleport in, you take the land, like that kind of thing. You can still do that to a degree, but yeah, it was really, really oppressive when this was any movement phase. And we knew it was strong when we spoke about it before, but yeah, it was only until like you started seeing people really abuse that you were like, oh yeah. No, yeah, that's bad. So So it's good that these have been fixed. They're nice to have as like a single unit. You don't want to be spamming them anymore. 170 points for 2, 3 health, so surprisingly tanky, considering, you know, you see like a couple of guys going around, but yeah, they've got a bit more health to go on. They're just as tanky as like a spirit host. And the Curse or Loyalty thing, like I said, is really nice. This is something you can surprise your opponent with. Combine that with Ladio. Ladio makes them -3. All of a sudden you give all your guys like +3. Your heroes that are like 2 control score now become 5, and then all your units get +3. These guys are obviously only control 2, but they can become control 5 when they charge in. So you can really like sprinkle in some things. This again is kind of like the Lord Executioner's second part of his ability. Like, this is a nice cherry on the top, but a unit of these for like battle tactics, excuse me, for battle tactics and things like that is absolutely awesome. And yeah, they just do some really nice things. Their attacks aren't perfect, but like, this is like a great unit to sort of pile into the side of something else. Again, they're cavalry, so they can stun. So they're like just all around great support unit, and they won't feel bad if you take them at all. But thankfully, they're not oppressively broken anymore because they got their rule fixed. So that's good. Next up is the Guardian of Souls. And yeah, again, he's kind of what he always is. We were talking about when this guy first came out, his Nightmare Lantern has been changed, so he now has to be in combat to give the +1 to wound buff to all friendly Nighthaunt wholly within 12, which is a fantastic buff. Obviously, we can get all-out attack to give ourselves +1 to hit. Being able to get +1 hit and +1 to wound is awesome on a lot of units, like a lot of our fighting units. The thing that we were really worried about with the Guardian of Souls was the fact that he has to be in combat. And this is something I spoke about slightly with the Kern Wraith, and I've learnt to do more through playing. But again, you keep someone like a Guardian of Souls, it's great to keep a bit further back than your unit is. If you're afraid that you're going to get charged on your opponent's turn, most of the time you want to try and set it up so that you'll be doing the charging. But if you know that, you know, that opening turn you want to play a bit more cagey, you put your unit up wherever you want the unit to be. You put the Guardian of Souls slightly behind. If the opponent wins the priority, they get the turn, they come on in, they're going to charge into your unit. You won't have the buff of the Guardian of the Souls on the turn that you get charged, but then when it flips over to your turn, your Guardian of Souls will be easily able to charge in. Maybe you want to use the Petrify from him. Again, we spoke about Petrify so much, and that just shows the importance of it. Something that we didn't talk about a lot in the opening thing, but it's absolutely huge, putting that strike last onto the enemy. And that makes something like the Guardian Souls so much more safer. So it's basically like doing a counter charge, not the actual command ability counter charge, but like letting the opponent charge on into your troops and then using a support hero like a Guardian of Souls to almost go in like a second wave. He puts the strike last on, then he's also given his buff to the unit that's now +1 to wound, and they're going to be able to fight before the enemy striking last, as long as obviously you haven't been debuffed. There's no striking first shenanigans going on, but you'll know all that before obviously you decide to commit the Guardian of Souls. But it makes something like this, where he has to be in combat to give this buff, not feel as bad. So yeah, we were worried about that, but it's actually not as bad as we thought, and he's still perfectly fine. He's 150 points, and being a one-cast wizard as well is just perfect for utility. Something like the Scriptor Mortis that misses out on, where they kind of, you know, have this rule, and then it's like, oh, but outside of that rule, how much helpful is it? Obviously, +1 to wound is way more helpful than the Scriptor Mortis's poor sentencing and mortal wounding thing. But yeah, just being a wizard as well is awesome. And he's still the only non-unique wizard hero that we have in the whole of Nighthaunt, so he's great in that regard. In case with the General's Handbook, if they tried to do anything like they did in 3rd edition, where there's the janky non-unique wizard only scoring things, then yeah, we'll be forced back into a meta where the Guardian of Souls is an auto include. So yeah, bear that in mind for any future rules that need non-unique wizards. Pyregeists. This is one that I wasn't too sure about. I still don't really know anything about them. I haven't seen them really be used, apart from, you know, people write some like weird lists to try and like spam them out. But yeah, I'm not really a big fan of their rules. Their low model count, there's only 8 of them, I think. They're 120 points, so they are cheap. Like, they do some deal of attacks that we spoke about, like 4s and 4s. Same kind of thing like a Banshee, like their combat attacks are the same as their shooting attacks. They can shoot in combat, so if they get in combat, it's kind of like doubling their attacks, but obviously one of them has rend, one of them doesn't. They're kind of nice to sit on a back objective maybe and shoot some bale fire. This light up higher thing, where it's, you know, they're contesting an objective and then they do some amount of mortal wounds and then they get boosted control score, like, just, yeah, for, you know, 100 points you can take 5 Craven Throne Guard who pump out shots and better range and also can shoot like non-visible targets and stuff. We'll see that obviously when we get to the Craven Throne Guard, but like for sitting on a back objective and a shooting unit, I'd rather just have 10 Chain Rasps or 5 Craven Throne Guard, or just, yeah, I don't really see the point of these guys. Like, they're kind of cool looking models. I know some people actually don't like these. These seem to be like Marmite or Vegemite. Some of you might know that as, but yeah, to us UK guys, this is like a Marmite unit. You either love them or you hate them. But yeah, I think they look cool, but in terms of rules, like, it just doesn't impress me very much at all. So yeah, that's Pyre, guys. And again, I don't really have any first-hand experience of these things. Like, all the Nighthaunt units I've played like so many times and across all the editions and things, and then obviously Pyre, guys, like slightly newer, and yeah, I just haven't bothered picking them up, and I don't use them, so I don't have any first-hand knowledge on them, I'm afraid. Spirit Torment. So this is something that I wasn't sure about. I've actually come to like Rally a lot more as I've like gone on with the edition and getting more hands on things. I actually really like rallying units. The problem with the Spirit Torment is he is 130 points, and it's like 130 points for 3 extra rally rolls, you know, on average, because it's a 4+, it's like you make 1.5 more things. So by the time he's actually paid for himself, it's like really difficult to like work out whether his math actually pays for himself at the end of it. He doesn't really do anything else other than this captured soul energy, which is the thing. Like, he can't really fight. Sure, you can give him your command traits and artifacts if you don't have anyone else that can carry them, but again, you'll probably want them on something a bit better, like a Lord Executioner or Guardian of Souls can give you way more utility. He does work really well with Nagash. Like I said, that 3 extra rally rolls on someone like Nagash is awesome. But then, like I said, with Nagash, like I said, you can really nicely power out your manifestations, whether you want Term and Exus or the Emerald Life Swarm. Much more consistent ways to heal him, plus you'll still get 6 rally rolls anyway. So it's, yeah, I've gone from like not really liking the Spirit Torment to like he's on the fence, because it's one of those things you kind of have to gamble with him. Like, when you make 9 rally rolls instead of 6, when the roll goes really well, it feels great. When it doesn't, it just feels like a complete waste of points, which I get you can say about anything, but like, seeing as that's the Spirit Torment's thing, like, that's how it just feels. It does feel nice, I will admit, when you get to rally on something that's multi-wound. Spirit Hosts, Hex Wraiths, those kind of targets, even like a Black Coach, because Black Coach can't heal outside of the Term and Exus. It's a bit like one of our heroes. It's that kind of weird unit keyworded way, obviously a single entity, so it really struggles to heal. So the Spirit Torment is fantastic for being able to buff that. But again, slight spoiler alert, like we spoke about with the Cavalcade of Death formation, the Black Coach just isn't very impressive. So, you know, paying points for a Black Coach, then paying points for a Spirit Torment, then having to not be in combat to then rally a Black Coach, it just feels like a waste, because a Black Coach should just always be in the thick of it anyway. So he does have utility there, but yeah, he's not great, but he's not as bad as I first thought. So yeah, it's like rally is one of those things. I do like it, but it is very situational, and again, you just have to gamble on it, because he can really pay for himself when the rolls go well, and then when the rolls don't go well, Yeah, so like from a competitive side point, you're better off just spending those 150 points on more bodies and just trying to kill before you get killed, instead of relying on a rally. But situational builds can call for a Spirit Torment to actually be better than I thought he was going to be on our initial pass. Basically is where I've gone with that, on a short version of what I've just spent 5 minutes explaining. Which I feel like I've done a lot. This video is going on long. If you're still here, thank you very much. I don't know how you've survived this long, just listening to me going on and on and on and on. But we shall go on some more. And with that, we have Grimghast Reapers, our first of the big meaty troop choices. Again, Kern Wraith, we already spoke about the combination with them. They have their 2 attacks base. Anti-infantry is absolutely awesome. So they're basically Ren 2 against infantry. With the General's Handbook, these guys don't benefit from, obviously, you get to choose. If you go down that road and you do the whole honor guard thing, you get to choose like an extra buff. Depending what the enemy's got, like you could give them like the anti-cavalry thing. Sadly, you can't stack double anti-infantry. That was something like when I first put the General's Handbook and this together, and I was like, Ren 3 Grimghast with a Khan Wraith and the Light Shard. I was like, that's disgusting. Which you can't do that way. You can do it other ways. If you manage to get stun off using something else, like charging in with a different, like Hex Race and Grimghast into the same target. Use the Hex Race to stun them, so the enemy's -1 to save. If you've charged into an infantry unit, you're now Ren 2, so it makes you pseudo Ren 3. Like I said, you can buff these up to 4 attacks really, really nicely. Reap like corn. If there's more than 5 enemies in that unit, which more often than not there really is, you get the unmodified, you get the critical auto wounds on a 5+ to hit. Like Grimghasts are just fantastic. And I would probably say right now, I would say as long as you're not fighting against an all cavalry kind of list, which the cavalry are like out in spades just because of the way that 3-inch reach works, and the way that like a lot of points things are, and again that kind of battlefield presence and trying to get to objectives and things first, and running around the board trying to do your battle tactics, which can often cause you to be like, you need to be left side of the table now, and now you need to be on the right side of the table, or you need both at the same time. So like movement's a big part of the thing, and that extra combat range really incentivizes people to bring cavalry, but infantry is still a big part of the game. And just their points in general are absolutely fantastic. When we first looked at the index, Bladegeist Revenants were 150 points, Dreadscythe Harridans were 150 points, and Grimghast Reapers were 140 points. So they're like the 3 troops that you normally, or the 3 infantry units that you'll choose between, like which one to be your sort of main staple. They're all about the same points. Grimghast Reapers slightly cheaper than the other 2 by 10 points per 10 bodies, which is basically nothing over the long course of a game. But now the points are more spread out, so Grimghast Reapers have only gone up 10. Like, same profile, they absorb the same buffs. They like all of the buffs that we can put out, so they like all out attack. Even though you're going to be critting on 5s anyway, it just adds in even more, and with the weighted dice that you've got. So if you really want to, they like all out attack. They like a Guardian of Souls, they absorb that +1 to wound. Again, you're trying to do those many crit auto wounds with the amount of dice that you'll be rolling anyway. You probably won't need it, but if you want it, it's there. 150 points for 10. But Bladegeist Revenants are now 180 points, and Dreadscythe Harridans are 170 points. So Grimghast Reapers are still like the cheapest one, and now by a good lengthways. So like 30-point difference between them and Revenants. When you suddenly reinforce both of them, it's 60 points difference, which doesn't sound like a lot on the like cusp of things, but once you start trying to add in your heroes, your different supporting elements, once you add in like a unit of reinforced Hex Wraiths, that 60 points really adds up at the end of the list building. So you can save yourself a lot of points, bring the Reapers, and they just do absolutely fantastic. And like I said, there's a lot of incentive for people to bring cavalry, but there's always normally some infantry on the table, unless it's like some sort of weird skewed list. Even then, they're going to be reinforced units of cavalry, so they're going to have more than 5 models, so you're still critting them anyway. Even without the extra rend, we've got other ways to bring more rend with the stuns. If you want, bring Purple Sun into your list. Reikenor can power that out quite nicely, and just, yeah, absolute whale of a time with Grimghast Reapers and just scything down the enemy. And again, that combo we already spoke out with the Khan Wraith when we were on the Khan Wraith, but you can just make your Grimghast Reapers into absolute blenders. 81 attack potential with the artifact and the hero nearby them. Chain Ghasts are as disappointing as we thought they were when we first spoke about them. They have this horrible rule to give you +1 to your hit rolls on the roll of a 3+, on the roll of a 2+ if they're wholly within 12 inches of a Spirit Torment, while they're wholly within 12 inches of another Nighthaunt unit. So it's like, I don't like this because you have to bring them as a unit, then you have to bring the Spirit Torment to make this easier to get off, and even then it's still not guaranteed. They have to be wholly within him, and he has to be wholly within a unit. It's just a big mess. Like, and all that for +1 to hit. You just spend a command point on all that attack, get it over with. Or if you really wanted to, just bring like the Night Shrouds and just do the whole Overseer thing and fight, and then give yourself +1 to hit, and then fight immediately afterwards. So much easier than dealing with Chain Ghasts, who then don't do anything else other than this. Like, their shooting is pitiful, their attacks are pitiful, they're an infantry unit, so they're not like their heroes when they can't take anything else or, you know, hold on to any items or anything. They just live for this, and this is rubbish because you can get +1 to hit so much easier. So yeah, Chain Ghasts gone. And next, Chain Rasps. Oh, Chain Rasps. Yeah, so I like Chain Rasps a lot as a model, but they are just not very good in this index at all. They are 100 points for 10. The thing they suffer with is they've only got a 5+ ethereal save. They're the only thing in the entire Nighthaunt range that doesn't have a 4+ ethereal, which is fine because they're like half the size, if not less, than like a Grimghast Reaper or a Bladegeist Revenant, etc. So they are supposed to be like the smaller, weaker ghosts, and that's fine, we get that. They have their malignant weapons. I don't know why I said that so weird. 2 attacks, 4s and 5s with no rend 1 damage, so it's like, oh, I would say this is an okay weight of dice. Like when you reinforce them up to a unit of 20 guys with 2 attacks each, it's obviously 40 dice. But in a Nighthaunt army, it's like 2 attacks is basically the normal for us with our infantry. Like Bladegeist 2 attacks, Harridans, Reapers, like, and they've got way better profiles because they're way better ghosts. And again, the points have changed slightly because before, like I said, when Grimghast Reapers were like 140 points, you just pay the extra 40 points and bring 10 way better ghosts. And I think that's the problem with Chain Rasps. They need to be not cheaper, but I think maybe like zombies in Soulblight, where zombies come in units of 20. Maybe make them like 150 for 20 Chain Rasps, so you can reinforce them up to a unit of 40. Then that way they've at least got the weight of bodies on their side. They've got the 5+ ethereal save, which obviously they're a lot more survivable than zombies purely because they're ethereal. You're going to ignore 1/3 of the attacks that come into you. And they've got the ward, which you can buff it with Discorporate if you really wanted to. But the thing is, they're so like pitiful with attacks. Like, that should be their thing. They should just be a big tar pit, and just get in the way. Like, sit on objectives. Just go, right, here's my 40 guys on objectives. They're absolute pants. Kill them if you can. And like, yeah, that should be their thing. Chilling Horde as well. I think this should be a different buff. +1 to wound when they charge, so they become 4s and 4s. Like, I think these should just be 4s and 4s anyway, to give them a bit more incentive. Some people say that Chain Rasps would have a 4+ save, but like, I don't mind them being on 5s as long as they stay cheap and cheerful. But this should just be like 4s and 4s. As soon as you get hit by any sort of debuff, I don't know why the enemy would target them with a debuff when, you know, there's 1,000 or 1 other priority targets in our army roster. But yeah, if you've got a big unit of Chain Rasps, you know, they get hit by a -1 to hit, they go to 5s and 5s. It just feels like silly. So I think this should be 4s and 4s. This shouldn't be +1 to wound rolls if they charge. Like, maybe Chilling Horde should be like, maybe it should be like a debuff for the enemy, because these could be the you know, the silly little ghosts that just want to tar pit you, bog you down. So it's like, maybe if the Chain Rasps outnumber the enemy that they're in combat with, then the enemy's -1 to wound. Make them like harder to kill. So they keep the crap save, do like next to nothing attacks, but then they make it even harder to kill them if they outnumber you, and then bump their like base unit size up, so there's an incentive to bring lots of chain rats and just dump on an objective. So yeah, it won't feel oppressive because they're not doing anything, but just, yeah, make them more attractive to bring, because yeah, they're, you know, I sometimes bring them if I've got like the odd 100 points left, but you can just bring Craven Throne Guard or something like that instead for the points, and just sit them out on the side on an objective, which is basically all these guys do, because they don't absorb the buffs very well, they don't fight very well, they don't survive very well either. So yeah, it's a shame, because chain rats are cool, and I feel like, you know, they need something to give them more of that role rather than what they are. So yeah, bump up their unit size, make them a little bit more expensive, give them some sort of debuff rather than like making them try and be better at fighting, which they're pants at anyway. So yeah. Next up we have the Black Coach. So we spoke about the Black Coach a few times. Obviously the disappointing sub-faction or battle formation. I always say that, and then I always correct myself. It's like I can't remember the words battle formation without saying sub-faction first. But yeah, so the Black Coach is it's just, so we spoke about the main thing it has now. So it still does impact hits, so it does D3 on a 2+ D3 mortals when it charges. It can teleport as long as it's not in combat. These are cool, we don't mind these at all. I'd like it to be able to teleport even when it's in combat. Again, kind of that like, oh no, escape button, and then just teleport off, and then when it's near death, and then you can try and heal it up and then bring it back in another turn or two. But I get why, you know, you can't teleport out of combat, because then things start to get impressive. Like if the whole army can just keep teleporting out of combat, you might as well have just kept Deathstalkers so everyone can just retreat. So I get it. So these are fine. Like I like doing impact mortals, and I like the teleport. Invocation of Death is something that we spoke about. It's the one, if this unit destroys any enemy units, you can pick a friendly and non-unique hero that's been destroyed, and you can basically set them up again wholly within 12 inches of the Black Coach. So it's really cool, because we haven't seen anything like this before, where it's like you can heal or replace slain heroes. But it's just like with this profile, with this with these attacks, it's so hard to kill something. Even with your impact hits, like you need something to be on its last legs. The most easy thing to try and get this with is like a wounded hero, like a 5 wound hero who's already taken a couple of wounds, like chip wounds from somewhere else, and then the Black Coach just sort of like appears out of the side and like slams them with a steel chair kind of feel. You know, or if there's a unit with like 1 or 2 models left and the Black Coach goes off after them, like that is the only way really to get the Invocation of Death off. But it's like you need that enemy unit to basically be sitting on a platter for you to kill, and you also need your hero to already be dead. So it's like, it's just so situational to pull this off. Like as cool as of a trick as this is, I keep saying like in the book or in the index, there's no real way to like heal heroes, and I guess the incentive is like, well, as long as you don't get your big heroes killed, just bring a Black Coach, and the Black Coach can bring them back to life. But it's like, just feels really janky to try and like pull this off. And yeah, I feel like the Black Coach, it's really cheap. They've made it 240 points, so if you bring back like a 150 point hero, like it makes the coach so super cheap. And it's like, why is it so cheap? Because the rest of it's rubbish. It's 12 health on a 4-up save. Obviously it is ethereal, it has a 6-up ward. It's okay. Like again, depending how you tank those ethereal saves, or even if you just get hit by something that does mortal wounds, like if there's something that does like crit mortals and a bunch of attacks, like the coach just folds. And it's like, I get that's why it's so cheap, because it basically only starts to pay for itself if you pull this off. But everything else is just like rubbish. And like, you look at the Black Coach, like that model is so damn impressive. Like the whole Nighthaunt range is beautiful, really, but like the Black Coach is like such a nice like centerpiece model. It's huge, like it's so big and cool. It hangs off its base and it's really awkward. And yeah, those bits. But anyone, you know, you just have to Tokyo drift your Black Coaches in. Anybody who's tried to charge, or even if you get charged by a Black Coach, you know that pain. It's like the Black Coach charging Lumineth Wardens is like the worst case scenario, because then it's a war of who's going to poke whose models without actually getting into base contact. Different dilemma. But yeah, it's just like, it's such a cool big centerpiece, fantastic kit. And it's not cheap either, so it's like buying a Black Coach is quite an investment, like physical money wise, to own the model and then have it in your army. And then for it to be so like just feels bad. Like, make the Black Coach like 300, 400 odd points, but just make it good. Like that'll be fine. Like if it's nearly a quarter of my army, but it's absolutely baller, then that would be fine. The one nice thing it does have, and I did say this in the initial assessment, is that it now, like, I know it's part of their thing of simplifying the scrolls and making everything easier. They used to make you choose between the Grasp and the Wraith weapon, which I always thought was like ridiculous. And it's nice that he now has access to all his attacks, but like, it's a lot of attacks, but it's a lot of like nothing. You know, like the 5+ to hit here, this is 6 but has no rend. The actual Wraith weapons are okay. And the one thing I will say is, obviously, it's a war machine, so you can use stun when you charge in, make the enemy -1 to save. So you can see this as a 3, and you can see this one as a 1, and a 1. But like, yeah, it's still just like, you know, again, if this gets debuffed by anything, like its hit rolls, it just doesn't do enough. And again, they've made it cheaper for that reason. It's only 240 points, but like, just make the attacks really good. Like, and I'd prefer it, like, get rid of this. Like, it's cool, but like, I'd rather the Black Coach have what it had in 2nd edition, where it used to have like this little I don't want the power up table back. That used to be horrible. It was like you'd roll 3 dice, and for each 4+ it would gain a level, and there was like 6 levels of power or something like that. And then it would gain buffs depending on what power level it was on. But it also used to just return like whole slain models. You just pick a unit and like return a slain model to that unit for the turn. Like, that's kind of how I always envision the Black Coach, you know, because it's supposed to be drawing in all this power, and it's like this Nimbus kind of thing, which is, well, where this rule comes from, the Nimbus of power. And it's like, it should just be this kind of like big ball of death magic that's just like slamming around the battlefield, like charging into enemy units, like piling through them, doing loads of damage, and then just kind of like, you know, that death energy spilling over into the friendly units around it. Like, that's how I envision the Black Coach. And other than the impact hits that it deals, it's like, it doesn't do the rest of it. So it's fast, like it's a bit faster, it moves 10. It's not very tanky, but like that's fine if it was like, you know, better it's like charging into things. If it was kind of like a really good at killing things but then a bit more susceptible to damage, I'd be fine with that. But yeah, I just feel like it needs to do more like supporting thing, and this invocation of death, as cool as it is, and we haven't really seen that before for Nighthaunt, it just doesn't land for me. And I think it would be better off just doing something like healing other units, or just giving some sort of plus somewhere else. Even in the 3rd edition one, where they changed it so it was like it would stack up the points, and then it would give itself a good ward save, and then you could expend that to then shoot like a bloody mortal 3d6 mortal wounds or whatever crazy. I think it was 3d3 mortal wounds. Can't remember off the top of my head. He used to do, like the mortal wound laser beam explosion. Like, even that I feel was better than this, but that didn't still to feel Black Coach. Black Coach to me should be like impact hits, damage, and like healing support, but you know, fragile-ish. But just again to round that off, like, you know, it's one of those things I get. Obviously, I'm sat here and I'm like, I want it to basically do everything. I want it to heal and damage and be quick and do this. But then again, just make it like 400 points. Like, that's fine. Make it expensive, but make it powerful. That's the point. Like, you know, you're only supposed to want one black coach. Make it a powerhouse. Like, and then yeah, the battle formation around it again is, like we spoke about, has all its own problems in its own ways, because that 6-inch bubble just isn't big enough for what it offers. Like, giving out that 5+ ward, which we can already get through Discorporate, it just isn't it. It just isn't it. So yeah, that's the black coach. Slightly disappointing. Bit of a rant on that one, I know. It does have some, you know, there are some utilities to it, like when you start racking up the mortal wounds in conjunction with like some hex race that can obviously keep up with it. So it's like heal impact hits, the hex race will deal impact hits, and then obviously they're going to be putting -1 to save on things. So it's like, it's fine when it charges in as a support unit, but it should feel more impactful when it does. So yeah, it's a shame, but we'll see. Craven Throne Guard. So this is our main shooting unit. These guys, I was a bit like so-so on them when we first went over them last time, but actually they are pretty good overall. Like, they're better than I thought it was. Almost like I said about like the Spirit Torment, it was one of those, it's like, kind of want to pass for it, but actually if you lean into it in the right situations, they can actually be really good. The Spectral Bolts is like really nice. So being able to pick enemy units that you are not visible to is lovely with like the new terrain. If you're fighting Sylvaneth and they try and hide behind their wildwoods when they're usually not visible, you just laugh in Spectral Bolts. And ignoring the negative modifiers to hit rolls is also fantastic, so you're like always hitting on the 4. And because it's only negative modifiers, if you really want to like all out attack with these guys, just be on 3s and 3s, then you can. And that's, again, you're not going to get hit by any negatives, so even if they're like -1 to hit or something, they won't put you back to 4s. So you can do some respectable chip damage with these guys. They come in 5s, which is like my only gripe with them. It's obviously they're still like really cheap points. I think maybe like these guys should be slightly more expensive and like 2 wounds a piece. I don't know, because obviously it's better for us, like actually in game terms, I think, for them to be cheaper. But it makes them more like spammable, whereas I think it would be nicer to have them a bit more solid. And then yeah, maybe give them like shooting combat +2 health, and then make them like more expensive, and then they'd feel like a more of a threat unit rather than like a cheap spammable unit, because that's kind of how you just see them at the moment. And I think it would be nice to be able to get them a bit more stuck in, rather than kind of like I've got 100 points left over, I'll just get 5 Craven Throne Guard and stick them on the battlefield objective, and if they do something, they do something. If they don't, they don't. But I feel like it would be nice to take like a reinforced unit of 10 and actually have them like semi like frontline, like actually use them as a proper unit, and not have to like kind of feel so like tiptoeing around with them, if that makes sense. Like, so yeah, I don't know if like maybe buffing their health or giving them shooting combat would be nice, because then they feel like they can get stuck in and they don't lose that kind of utility of being the shooting unit. But I also get that obviously you can't give them everything, because then yeah just be wanting too much from the unit. But I do feel like, you know, they are missing something, but their 8-inch move with their 16-inch range gives them a 24-inch threat range in total, and again, not being negative modifiers is nice. They combo in nicely with that kind of thing, and people are trying to hide behind terrain. Bladegeist Revenants. So these are still the kings, I think. These are still our best infantry pick. I know I was saying Grimghast Reapers earlier, I like how fantastic they are. Obviously with a Kern Wraith, like they do some absolutely insane things, but they do rely on that sort of like anti-infantry thing. And the nice thing is with Bladegeist Revenants, they're just like the kings of going into like anything, because their stat line is just so solid. Like 2 attacks +1 attack if they charge, so it's 3 attacks, 3s, even on Rend 1/1 damage. It's like there's enough of them, you take 20 of them, they're throwing out 60 attacks, 3s and 3s, so they absorb like all out attack. They absorb the Guardian of Souls, like +1 to wound, so nicely, like going into 2s and 2s. There's enough of them, like I said, throwing 60 dice with their crit auto wounds. They can get all the same Rend shenanigans that Grimghast do. Obviously they don't have a built-in anti-infantry thing, but these guys are fantastic in the General's Handbook. If you want to make them, you know, anti-infantry, then you can. Then they basically look like Grimghast Reapers, but with a better stat line. Obviously, they don't get the crit autos on 5s, but again, they're going to be this potent against something even if it has less than 5 models. So if they're fighting something really elite or a single entity, Bladegeist Revenants are like kings against everything. So I think Grimghast pip them to the post if you're fighting into 5+ infantry sized unit, but Bladegeist Revenants are kind of like that card where it's like it doesn't matter what you're fighting, they're just consistent. And from a competitive standpoint, like consistent is what you are going to be wanting. So yeah, that's why they're 180 points. They're the most expensive infantry of the three. Like the three main ones are always Revenants, Harridans, and Reapers. And I think that's what keeps them the most expensive, is because they're the most consistent. So they're always like the safe bet. But yeah, Bladegeist Revenants, like there's not too much to say about them. They've always been great. They're still great. And yeah, like just super solid. And they absorb, like I said, all the buffs that you want to put onto your units absolutely fantastically. You get a hero to go in with them, so you know you make the enemy strike last, and then punish them with the Revenants on top. So yeah. Glaive Wraith Stalkers. Oh boy. I don't even know where to start. It's a bit like the Scriptor Mortis, like that kind of unit. It's like you want to like them. They look really cool. They got the nice, you know, this thing's like a nice little gimmick thing. I think the thing that really ruins Glaive Wraith Stalkers still is just the unit size. Like the fact that they come in 4s, and they reinforce up to 8, and it's like +1 damage, so they become damage 2. They get this really cool thing where they stalk. They pick an enemy unit at the start of the battle, they become stalked, and then if they declare a charge and they're wholly within and they're within 12 inches of the stalked unit, they can get +2 to their charge rolls as long as they end in combat with the stalked unit. So basically you have to charge the stalked unit and you get +2 to charge rolls, which if you use the Terminexus can make you +3 to charge rolls. You could combo this with Alrich, so Alrich drops you like 7 inches away, and now you have +3 to your charge if you Terminex buff them up. So there's like some really cool things. Like you want to, like this almost like a little assassin unit, which is kind of cool. Like it's what they look like they should be doing. It's what they're like, the little lore points and all the blurbs, like when you actually read their profiles in the older codex, battle tomes, etc. Like when you read about them, like that's their whole thing. But then just on paper, like when you actually, I've tried using them, they just don't seem to land. Like again, kind of cool, like picking off something small, weak, like a little 5 wound hero, but then this can be like any enemy unit, and it's just like, you know, there's certain things that they can go into, like a little 5-man unit, or like some of these like warband units that you see like from Underworld or Warcry come across. They're just standing off on an objective. Like Glaive Wraith Stalkers could be really cool for clearing those, but they just don't, I don't know, it's just that 8-man unit thing, and they just never seem to do what you expect of them. It's like, oh cool, I got all this plus a charge, you charge in, it's like, then you don't even kill the weak thing that you charged, and then they just die, and it's like, oh. They are cheap, I'll give them that. They're 80 points per 4, but then almost like, you know, when you're looking at like chain rasps and you're like, well, I might as well just spend the extra 50 points and have Grimghast Reapers instead. It's like the same thing for these guys. It's like they're 80 points, just spend 20 points more, take the chain rasps. And that's the one time the chain rasp looks good. It's like compared to these guys, and it's a shame. It's a shame because yeah, with these kind of things, like yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where they need to make them more expensive. Bit like how like Mirmor Banshees are. When obviously we get to Mirmor Banshees, but like maybe they just need to have like a more stacked profile, even if they are smaller. Maybe bump them up, make them more expensive, but then yeah, make them an actual threat. That would be the thing. They can keep this like and give them a threat thing. That could be cool to see, I guess, maybe. And speak of the Banshees, I suppose, here they are, mere more Banshees. So like we were just talking about, like this like attack profile. So 2 attacks, 4s, 3s, Ren 2, so it's already Ren 2, and then D3 damage. So like maybe if the other guys were like, you know, Ren 2, damage, I suppose they still have to be like damage 1 plus 1. But yeah, I don't know, just something a bit more, because these girls actually swing. Like, this doesn't look like much, but when you've got a unit of 8 of them, and they suddenly all start like swinging, you've got 16 attacks that do D3 damage at Ren 2. That's before you even like start to stack anything else on them. If you all out attack, if they're within range of a Guardian of Souls, if you've used stun from something else like charging in on the flank, you can really make these ladies like swing. Once that goes to like 3s, 2s, Ren 3, D3 damage with 16 attacks. Obviously, you could petrify them if they're going to be near a hero and the hero's charged in. Like, you can really stack the things in their favor and take this from what looks like a fairly random profile to actually something that really does the damage. And even then, with the crit auto wounds, that comes up quite a lot. Once you start rolling them 16 dice, you spike them, you get like 3 or 4 wound, like auto wounds go through. Feels nice. And again, that's just straight up with like the Ren 2 D3. So this does a lot more than it feels like it does. Their health buff was really nice. I wasn't sure how that was going to sort of play out. But that actually does feel really good in the longer run, healing them back up, even with like Spectral Law and something that does like a D6. I thought like healing them by 2 was going to be you know, more tricky to actually do, but even things like Lady O, when she does a D3 plus 3, like she's going to get a minimum 2 of these Banshees back if you've lost a couple. And Spell Eaters is still really nice. A lot of the spells in the game though, like the best spells in the game, is something I hear from Haywo a lot, quotes, and it is very much true. But Spell Eaters is one of those things, like the best spells in the game are usually buff spells, so they're targeting their own units. Like you're going to be giving yourself like a nice ability off the back end of it. So it's less often that you'll actually see something where it targets you, but when it does, like this is so nice. Like just even the threat of it. Say like Slaves to Darkness, because obviously they're a big popular faction doing really well right now. They have the spell in their lore, the unlimited one, that just does the straight up mortal wounds to you. Like, you really make them think twice. Like a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, it's only a small hero with a few wounds. Like, if he's going to get bounced back like D3 mortal wounds, and then obviously the amount of things that in our army that can actually do like impact hits, so like Hex Race, the Black Coach. Maybe you've been crazy, you didn't take Deathstalkers and you took the one where your heroes are going to do D3 mortal wounds on a 2+ at the end of the turn. Like, those sort of combinations really make the Mirmons like a threat. And that's the thing, like wizards, like we spoke about when we got to Reikenor, wizards are everywhere at the moment, usually because they're going to be trying to spam out manifestations, which is another sort of like a Debbie Downer, I suppose, to Spell Eaters. Obviously, your opponent's going to be like, oh, yeah, you've got Banshees, I'm not going to target you with a spell. I will just use up all my casts to spam out all these manifestations which don't target you. Which is, you know, fair enough, because if I was to see this on the other side of the table from me, I would think the same thing. I'd think, yeah, I don't want to target your guys, or I'm going to pick the ones that are not, you know, wholly within 12 of the Banshees, because the Banshees can't be everywhere. But they will cover the sort of main target that you don't want to get hit by said spell. But then again, that's where these chill daggers come in, and these really do swing a lot harder than people give them credit for, and can be quite a nice surprise. And the enemy will quite often underestimate the Banshees, in my opinion. And because they're such a small model count, they're 4s, reinforced up to 8s, they're quite easy to like fit in the little pocket somewhere and then kind of just jump out and shout surprise. So yeah, really like the Banshees in this iteration of them. And I always try and put like a unit, usually just the one, reinforce them if I have the points, but usually just try and fit like 4 Banshees in there. And if the enemy wants to focus them down, they're only 120 points, but just for that utility of the kind of, are you sure you want to target me with that spell button, I feel is often worth the points alone. Spirit Hosts, oh, so this is like my other favourite unit. anyone that knows me, spirit hosts, I love these guys. Everyone hates building them. They get a really bad reputation. I actually don't mind it. Maybe it's because I've built like 30 spirit hosts over my lifetime. But yeah, I don't know. Building these guys now is just like, just kind of see it in my sleep. Yeah, the drawn to war thing, like giving people a 4-up ward save is nice. Like, the thing is, I always used to love pairing Lady O with my spirit host. She doesn't need it anymore because she has the 4+ ward save built in, and a lot of the other infantry heroes I find don't really need a 4+ ward. Lord Executioner already has a 5+ ward, so you know, it's like +1, is it really worth it? And then you think of all the other like infantry heroes, so it's like Tomb Banshee, Spirit Torment, Khan Wraith, Guardian of Souls, Night Shrouds on foot. Like, do they really need a 4+ ward save? And considering that those sort of heroes are like 150 points ish anyway, like give or take, some slightly up, some slightly down, and then spirit hosts are 130 points for 3 on top. So it's like you take a 150 point hero, 130 point spirit host, put them together, and then all of a sudden it's like you spent 280 points on just giving that hero a 4-up ward. And it's like, it's just not really worth it. To be fair to the spirit hosts, the one thing that I do find they're really, really underrated with is if you take them, not so much for the bodyguard rule, but you take a reinforced unit of 6 spirit hosts, they still have 6 attacks each, with crit auto wounds, which I know on average only gives you 1 in every 1 spirit host that swings. So if you have 6 of them, you're only on average going to get 6 crit auto hits anyway. But like, a unit of 6 of them is still going to throw 36 attacks. And, you know, with 36 attacks, I don't know if it's just me and it's, you know, using spirit hosts throughout the years, but I always find like my spirit hosts just seem to overperform. Even though it's 4s and 4s, no rend 1 damage, they just seem to do more damage than a lot of other things that would have a similar stat line to that. So again, maybe that's just me, but yeah. And you don't want to be like, these guys can absorb all your buffs, you know, give them +1 hit, +1 wound, etc. You can do all the same tricks to make sure that they've got rend. So if you've got stun coming in from somewhere, purple sun nearby, you know, you can start to give them rend, and then they do become a little bit scary. But the main thing I love them for is that second wave thing. So not only do they throw like 36 attacks, which can catch some people off guard for only 6 models, but is that they're still 3 health, 4-up save, ethereal, and a 6+ ward, which obviously you can buff if you really wanted to. And it's kind of like you go in like wave. I always try and play my Nighthaunt like wave 1, wave 2. So like wave 1 will be, say, like your Hex Wraiths, your Grimghast Reapers, your Bladegeist Revenants. They want to just go in as soon as possible, hit the enemy as fast as possible while there's as much of them alive, deal as much damage with as many bodies as you have, and then try and, you know, push through and really pressure the enemy. Sometimes, obviously, that plan doesn't go our way. You charge in, you might not deal as much damage as you wanted, you hit back really hard, and then you want to try and like retreat over the lines, heal up, and then try and go back in. And spirit hosts are like that perfect unit for when your kind of like alpha first wave attack didn't quite go to plan, and then it's like your spirit hosts go in and then your other unit comes back just while you're kind of trying to recover from it. And it's like spirit hosts are still so hard to like try and chew through. They're not many bodies, but wounds per body. You know, everybody knows how hard it is to try and cut through 10 Hex Wraiths and 6 spirit hosts, although they're not quite in that same ballpark in terms of like wounds because of the bodies. There's only 6 of them, not 10. Like, they are still like incredibly difficult to chew through. And once you start using the healing, once you've got something like Nagash or Lady O on the table, you can actually bring the spirit host back quite reliably as well. So they're kind of good for that thing on the table that no one expects anything from spirit hosts anymore. Long gone are the days where these bad boys used to do mortal wounds on 6s to hit, and then the Night of Shrouds would make them do mortal wounds on 5s, and they're throwing 36 dice, and then you do mortals on 5s, and mortal wounds was super rare and good old days. It's just me, I bring that up every time about 2nd edition. Yeah, them Malaya Importance times were good times for spirit hosts. I mean, admittedly, they were like the core infantry only thing that you could have. It was them, Hex Race, and 3 heroes. So, yeah, it wasn't much to choose from, but that's what they did. But yeah, so moving on. Dread Scythe Harridans, so the other like third main infantry thing. Obviously, we've been comparing it all video long, Revenants, Harridans, and Reapers. And Harridans are, I think it's still like the same assessment I had before. It's like Bladegheists are like top billing, Grimghast Reapers are second billing, and it's like Dread Scythes are kind of like bottom of my pile to go to. But at the same time, if you can layer in all of the different things, like Dread Scythe Harridans can be fantastic. One thing I will say for them is they really like to go for monsters, because of their murderous bloodlust, like where they're getting +1 hit and +1 wound against an enemy that's been damaged or had anything slain that turn. Like once the monsters start taking damage, the Dread Scythe Harridans just click up to 3s and 3s straight away. Now, one thing that a lot of people say is like, obviously with all the different buffs like all out attack, maybe again Guardian of Souls +1 wound, the Dread Scythe Harridans don't take them very nicely because they can already give themselves +1 hit and +1 wound, and you can't stack that more than once, so you can't make this 2s and 2s. But in that same breath, it's like if the enemy's trying to debuff you, they are perfect in the fact that they give themselves +1 hit, +1 wound, then maybe the enemy hits you with -1 hit, -1 wound, and then again you throw in your all-out attack, your Guardian of Souls, you still get back to 3s and 3s. So this is like the perfect kind of like anti-debuff rule, and then anything else you put on top of them is like perfect. And then if you don't get debuffed, then you don't need it. So you don't need to spend this command point to like all-out attack or anything. So like they can keep that respectable stat line, because 4s and 4s, obviously if you get hit by a debuff and you don't pull this off and you don't spend the CP, like going to 5s and 4s can be really bad. And again, I think that's where Revenants really shine, because they sit on that 3s and 3s. They can easily get to 2s and 2s. So it's like Harridans, you know, again, as long as you're checking this box, they love being near Reikenor, because Reikenor will use his corpse candles in any hero phase. You can pick off an enemy model or damage someone with the corpse candles. Tick that murderous bloodlust, get them to 3s and 3s, even in the enemy turn. And then they are absolutely swinging. And again, Harrowing Shriek, it's one of those things. It's like Shade Mist, obviously spell, put it on a unit, make them -1 to be wounded. But it's like Dread Scythe Harridans just have this built in, so it's like you can use that spell elsewhere, free up that utility. Again, put that on like your unit of 10 Hex Race, for example, and then the Dread Scythe Harridans can benefit from basically the same thing, which we all know how strong Shade Mist is, but without actually needing to cast the spell or risk being unbound, etc, etc. So they can bring so much of that utility through their 2 different passives, but it's just a question of like, are you charging? Are you fighting something where you can, you know, pull this off? And there's tons of different ways to get Murderous Bloodlust off, whether it's like Magical Intervention, Corpse Candle, you can shoot like something like Craven Throne Guard, even Lady O can, you know, use her shooting attack, something like that, even with like Covering Fire or something. So even like, out of turn, you can get this by slaying a model in the enemy turn quite easily. Impact hits, like if you just let anything fight before they do, plenty's like 1,000,001 different ways to get this off. Harrowing Shriek obviously is only in every other turn. Shade Mist, obviously the benefit to that is it carries through the different turns, but even still, like between this and the Wave of Terror, like you're going to be getting this off on your turns. Then there's plenty of ways to heal them up, because they're only the one wound, like Spectral Tether, Lady O's healing, anything like that. Like you can keep topping the Harridans up. They have a nice amount of attacks. They start off on 3, so that's one nice thing they have over over Revenants. Revenants are obviously 2s, then go up to 3s. So if you know how many attacks Revenants put and how that feels to use a 20-man unit of those, it's like Harridans are just like that, but all the time. Put a Light Shard near them, they become 4s, just pouring out buckets of dice. So this like requires a bit more nuance to use, but you get it in the right places at the right times, and they can be just as deadly. And at that point they are 10 points cheaper than Revenants, which is splitting hairs at 20 points for a reinforced unit, but sometimes 20 points can make or break your list depending on what else you are bringing. So yeah, you really can't go wrong with taking Harridans, just a little bit of foresight to make sure you're really getting that bloodlust off. But like I said, between magical intervention, corpse candles, covering fire, there's tons of ways to get that off in the enemy turn, and then obviously in your own turn, impact hits, just normal shooting, normal spell casting, still corpse candle. Like there's so many ways to get bloodlust off that, yeah, I think Harridans get slept on a lot because Revenants and Grimghast Reapers are just like more point and click, but Harridans are for sure like definitely in with that shout. Hex Wraiths. Oof. So this is the spicy of the last unit of the entire index. So if you've made it this far, then definitely tip my hat to you. I know I've said that already at like the halfway stage, but like I think I've taken even longer to get here, and now I'm wasting more time talking about the time it took to get here. So I'm gonna press on. But Hex Wraiths, whew. Yeah, these guys definitely underestimated from me when this first came out. These guys are now 200 points for this profile, whereas before, what were they? They were Control 2. They were 160 points for 5. And yeah, just didn't even like, obviously knew the importance of Hex Wraiths, but like once you reinforce these up, I didn't quite take into account just how we spoke about earlier, like cavalry, the whole 3-inch reach thing. So a unit of 10 Hex Wraiths, like having 3-inch reach, so you basically always get them all in. You're going to be using stun when you charge in, so this suddenly becomes like 2 attacks, 4s, Ren 2 because of the stun, although you know it's still Ren 1, but they're -1 save, I know. But pseudo Ren 2 and then they get +1 damage when they charge in, so it's like this becomes a really nice stat line. Even the horses, and with all the crit auto wounds, like it's just a ton of attacks, 5 attacks per model. You're going in with 10 guys, so you're basically throwing 50 dice. Wounds wise, you're a 30 wound unit with a 4+ ethereal save, so that means on average they're gonna have to do like 60 wounds to you just to cut through your health, and that's before you factor in the ward save, which obviously these guys are like a prime Discorporate target. Give them a 5+ ward save, shade miss them, so they're -1 to be wounded. Then all of a sudden that 30 health just becomes an absolute nightmare to try and chunk through. And like I said, opening salvo, really nice thing that you know is good to do is to use these with Deathstalkers. They move 12. You can auto run 6, so you can move 18. If you really want to, then again use the Terminexus, give yourself +1 to run, +1 to charge. So then they can move 19, and then you're going to be charging with your +1. So that's at least 20 inches that you're going, plus whatever you rolled. So a minimum of like a 3, so you can easily go like 22 inches on a bad charge. And then yeah, like anywhere, you can be going anywhere upwards of 22 inches, you know, all the way up to like your 30 inches. And that's just some incredible speed. And then if you are obviously playing in Deathstalkers to be able to do something like that, then you can just retreat the next turn and do it all over again. Spectral Hunters is fantastic because you're always wanting to be charging between Deathstalkers if you're using it, and or Wave of Terror, so you're just always like repeatedly just headbutting the enemy. Even if there's only one Hex Wraith alive, you still get the D3, because I know some cavalry units, like they do a thing where you roll a dice per model in the unit, and on like a 5 they do 1 mortal wound. But like Hex Wraiths are just one of those where it's just D3 mortals regardless, so whether you've got 10 or 1. So even if there's one Hex Wraith alive, it can, this Spectral Hunters rule can still just be an absolute nightmare for just chip damaging down the enemy. And yeah, just absolute nightmare to try and kill these guys. They like absorbing all the buffs, all out attack. It's weird to get a Guardian of Souls in range of a Hex Wraith, but it's nice when it happens. Like when this becomes 3s and 3s, 2s, 2s, like that's really nice. But yeah, usually a Guardian of Souls will be hanging out more with like your I say foot infantry, obviously everything's movement 8 and flies, but yeah, with all your infantry guys. But Hex Wraiths are just fantastic for just flinging across the board with that supersonic speed, charging into the enemy unit, and then just tying them up and just keeping them there, and then just repeatedly just chipping away at them while your Revenants, Harridans or Reapers, whichever flavour of like battle line, is then going through the enemy infantry. And by the time that they've finished dealing with your annoying hex race that have pinned them in, then hopefully you've mopped up everywhere else and done what you needed to do. But that is it. That is the entire faction pack, because after that it goes back to our endless spells. So apologies for this one being like a super long one. I did worry that it was going to go that way, because obviously there's just so much to talk about now, with all the things that we know from the Nighthaunt faction pack. But it's been really good. I do enjoy like this iteration of the rules. A lot of it feels very flavorful, which I think that Games Workshop have captured really nicely in 4th edition. Like throughout a lot of the factions, they sort of feel how they should play, like compared to the lore. Some of them better than others, but yeah, like I feel like Nighthaunt have got that kind of, you know, there's elements to them that really feel like you're playing against Nighthaunt, and it's nice to see some of the more oppressive things actually being like ironed out. So I know obviously the combination of Hex Race when they were Control 2, Dreadblade Harrows when they could teleport in either movement phase, and then combine that with Deathstalkers with how it was. Yeah, that's just like, you know, nightmare fuel for anyone. And then obviously with the points as well, like I said, Hex Race were 160 points when they first came out. So it's like 320 points for a 10-man unit, where now they're 400 points and not Control 2. So yeah, things like that like feel like good changes compared to the last time that we saw this index. I like the fact that between the Revenants, Harrows and Reapers, like the points have spread out a lot more, so it gives you more sort of food for thought, depending, especially when you're bringing like these bigger heroes. Then it actually makes it more of a choice, whereas before when they were basically all the same points, it was like you just always basically just bring just waves and waves of Revenants, because why not take the unit that's good against all comers when there's like no downside to doing that. But yeah, right now I think we're in a, you know, we're still in a, although stats wise it doesn't show, I watch Honest Wargamer. Rob does a really great thing with the stats, and yeah, I definitely recommend checking that out if you like seeing like tournament results and those kind of things, and where all the different factions are from big events. Nighthaunt's like stats are actually like way down, obviously since all the nerfs. I think a lot less people are playing them, and then with the rise of like Slaves to Darkness just being so like point click delete, which is that kind of that meta that we were talking about, like a lot of things want to be doing that, and they just do that so well at the moment. But Nighthaunt still has like, I still think we have so many like tools up our sleeve to be able to win in the way that we want to win. Of course there's going to be an adjustment when the battle tome comes out. It'll be interesting to see what the faction terrain does for us. I might do a separate video talking about that, because we saw with the Soulblight kind of article, they showed us like what they do, but it was all worded for like Soulblight, because obviously it was their article talking about their terrain. So whether we get like a similar thing, theirs was something like when you go to cast one of the manifestations from their manifestation lore, because they're now getting manifestations. Obviously we've already got ours, but they can then measure the range from the 3 different terrain pieces, which I imagine isn't going to be like the only thing that terrain piece can do. Obviously they've got lots of traits where they can like raise dead, put things in the grave, and then they come out. So I imagine they can all measure from the terrain as well. Maybe us for Nighthaunt will be able to do the same thing, like measure from our endless spells from the things, and maybe we'll get Underworld summons back, because that's something that obviously we're missing in this index that we used to have in 3rd edition. We used to be able to just be able to put units off the side of the table, and then bring them back in, just sort of like deep strike them onto the table. So maybe that's something we get back, and then you can deep strike within kind of range of the terrain piece. It'll be like they're coming out of the, I don't want to say coming out of the grave, because that's exactly how the Soulblight thing's worded, but I mean that's essentially what it is, isn't it? So yeah, so we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But I think our points and things are like landing in the right place. It would be nice to see some of these units like the Scriptor Mortis, like the Black Coach, I think be given more. And then a few little changes to things like units like Chain Rasps. Just give some of the units more utility, because, you know, we do suffer a lot from that. The whole 4th edition is just like, oh, this is your best unit, take that, reinforce it, then just take it a bunch more times. And then one of those other units, which for us is basically just Hexwraiths, Blade Geists, and or depending on your flavour, Grimghast Reapers at the moment, and then usually like Lady O and Alrich, and then just go for that like super alpha, charge in, devastate as much damage as you can, and then pop all your heals, hopefully get a double roll it over, and then yeah, just crush the enemy in that kind of opening wave, which again is a bit of a risk, because if you don't get the double, maybe you bounce off the enemy, that kind of thing. But it's like, you're usually favoured in this edition more for being aggressive, which is something that Nighthaunt is still very good at doing. And it's just sort of like which flavour of aggression you want. Thing is, with our index, we have a lot of things, and there's a lot of units and things that try and trick you to being more defensive, and like not being like, it's a weird one, because there's lots of things that obviously, like we spoke about, they benefit from being on the charge, but there's also a lot of things that, you know, like debuffs and things that will make you think like you can just take your guys, park up on an objective, and kind of be like an invincible ghosts. But yeah, you're only invincible in the fact that like you can punch really hard and then also be like pseudo tanky at the same time while you're killing the enemy. But the moment that you stop doing the killing part and then just try and be tanky, then it all sort of falls apart, which obviously with all the debuffs and things that we have will make you kind of sometimes think that you're a lot safer than you are if you take your foot off the gas and don't put that pressure down. But yeah, we do that really, really well, and like I said, it's really thematic. Hopefully the battle formations is a big one. Let's just go back to those a second. This is a big one. Like I like Deathstalkers as it is. Like obviously we talked about the nerfs and things at the time, but I would love to see these 3 changed and just be more, you know, what they do is fine, but they just need to be more. So like we spoke about, maybe this is so you can use it even when you're not in combat. Still a single unit, still only in your movement phase, still have to be outside of 9, but just make it, if you're not, like, even if you're in combat, so you can really flex like which unit you want to pull out, charge something else in, and then that unit can be at the back of the board, heal up kind of thing. Hunters the Accursed I won't go through in full, but like we spoke about whole like several changes to this. And then Procession of Death just needs to be bigger, make this bigger, and then make the Black Coach cool, make it hit hard and do cool things, and make it expensive if it has to be. Like, that's fine. Don't want to have to take like 2 cheap coaches that are so-so. I just want one big I just want one big Black Coach in the middle of my army that does like really efficient things. So that would be nice. And even the same with like the traits and the artifacts, like, you know, Light Shard and Ruler of the Spectral Host, they were pretty much the same in like 3rd edition. But there was other builds, like, you know, the other things, like I said, we spoke about the Night of Shrouds on Steed, where you could give them the artifacts and things to make them into like a mini Mortal Wound AoE bomb. And it was like there was just options to build other things, even though these were always like the choices. But I just feel like Cloaked in Shadow, Terrifying Entity don't really cough up enough to warrant building anything other than Spectral Hosts. And same with Familiar and Soul Firing. Like, these are the things that I was talking about, where it's like you need to get hit first to then be able to use this, and it's like we don't really stand up to that. You want to be doing the hitting, so you're just better off leaning into the other 2. And even with the Aura of Dreads, like, you know, petrify. How many times do we talk about, you know, petrifying the enemy, making sure you get this off with your hero, make something strike last, and then you want to follow that up with your big scary units, stun them as well if you can, and then just really pile on into the enemy and just delete them like one whole unit, if not 2 units at a time if you can, depending on the list, the matchup, the table, and everything obviously in front of you is very dependent on your game at the time. But yeah, you want to be throwing that punch rather than being punched. And yeah, the heroic traits and artifacts, it's like outside of these 2 just don't lend into that very well. And some tweaks to the manifestation law would be nice as well. I think just they don't need to be wildly different. Like, these are fine as they are. Just, yeah, I think maybe just let the Terminexus move. Even if that means we have to keep the silly like roller 2+ thing, just let it move. Vault of Souls is fine. Like, it just is what it is. That's just the manifestation rules, like the thing that it can be charged and killed, and that's normally what will happen when you try and set it up. Obviously, if you cast it out on your turn, then not so much. But like, if you try and set this up to then have the enemy come in and like do damage to you, they will often just take the Vault of Souls out at the same time. And the Reaper, I think the Reaper, the way it's like its rules are set up, it would just be nice if the Reaper could act more Nighthaunt like and just be able to retreat and charge. Like, that would be, I think that would make it a lot more scary. Because obviously its big thing is, if we quickly go back to its rules, I know I said like we were going to stop talking about things because I've just spent hours talking about things, but I just can't help it. I just like talking all things Nighthaunt. Oh, the PDF's frozen on me. I think we'll be there in just a second. Yeah, there we go. Shy Reaper. So yeah, like, this is like cool, but you get stuck, and then yeah, so maybe just make it so it's like, just add an extra little rule into the Shy Reaper and just be like, this unit can retreat and charge and take no mortal wounds when it does. Or even if it takes mortal wounds, like if it has to hurt itself but then can still charge, that would be cool. Just have this big ghost scythe just going around doing ghost scythy things. Yeah, so I think there's a few things that are just like little tweaks to some of our units. I don't think we need a massive overhaul, if I'm honest. Obviously with the teasers, we know we're going to get the terrain pieces, and there's teasers of the rumor engines that obviously we're going to get a new unit. I was going to say hero, but I don't want to. I don't think we don't need another hero. It looks like we're going to get another hero. There's a thing with like some potion bottles or something. Again, I'll do another video, I think, talking about all this just before the tome drops. Maybe I'll pull those rumor engines and things up. But yeah, it looks like we're going to get another hero of sorts, and it's just like we already have pretty much a hero for every occasion. Again, in some cases like the Scriptor Mortis, where they don't even do the thing that they want to do well. So it's like, I can really struggle to see what another hero is going to bring to the table. So I really hope it's not. Yeah, we're going to get new Hex Wraiths, I think, because Black Knights have obviously been revealed, and that's a dual kit. And I think that's the reason it's taken so long for Games Workshop to bother to do anything with that kit, is because Hex Wraiths and Black Knights are in the same kit. It's like, you can't do one without the other. It would just be a big waste of money for them to then go in, edit the sprues, take the Black Knights out, and then repackage the Hex Wraiths as their own thing. That would really suck and just be a waste of time, I think, on their part. So it's like, now that there's new Black Knights coming, I think we're going to get new Hex Wraiths. So we get terrain, we get new Hex Wraiths. This other thing, I mean, it might not even be for us, this other potion bottle, but it's like, it looks like a really Nighthaunt, like a spindly arm holding this bottle. So maybe we get another hero, but I'm going to struggle to see what role that hero is going to bring to the table. But yeah, even just some resculpts, I think, of maybe some of the older stuff could be more warranted. Like Tomb Banshee, the Khan Wraith, they finally get some cool rules. Even though the Khan Wraith, like I said, is the more competitive choice, Tomb Banshee is like a thematic choice. Those models are like really old, like fantasy characters, so maybe they get a glow up, like model wise. Scroll wise, I think they're fine. So that could be cool, and obviously not change or add anything more, because we've got more heroes than units now, I think. So yeah, we'll just have to see. It's an exciting time ahead. But yeah, on a whole, like, I think the faction pack was really good. Those things that were really overtuned, it's nice to see them come down. But I think we're in a good place, and we're just like a few tweaks away. And obviously with how the new terrain and stuff's going to interact with us, could open up some more avenues of play. Maybe see some expanded traits and things. Level out the battle formations, and I think, like I said, unit wise it's fine. It's the fact that we're so one-dimensional, because we're shoehorned in the battle formation the heroic trait and the artifact pretty much all chosen for you, unless you're trying to do something like very left field, and then at that point you've like shot yourself in the foot to begin with, already making it harder than it needs to be. So yeah, I think just more choice. Like the things that we've got are great, just tweak them so they're more a balance to opposing each other, then instead of like making everything outright competitive, it just needs to be more internally balanced, I suppose is the way I'm looking to word that. And yeah, then I think we're in a really, really great place going forward for the tome, and I'm excited to see what they do with that, and excited to obviously deep dive those kind of things. I've been away for basically the entirety of the index, like not posting on YouTube, so I didn't get the chance to do like as many deep dives for units as I would have liked to, but when the tome drops, that's definitely something that we're going to be looking at doing. So yeah, that's everything. I'm going to stop talking now because this has been like 3-4 hours. I don't even know what the runtime is. But if you've made it this far, then you are an absolute trooper, and I salute you. And yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you want to talk more, then you can join the Lakey Wargames Discord, link in the description below. All my other social medias will be in the description as well. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe and happy wargaming.